It was the overhead lights. They just shut them off. Because it was the overhead lights.
Good evening, everyone. I would wait a motion to leave the non-public and to seal the minutes.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And welcome now to Monday, May 15th, 2023 City Council meeting. Kelly, when you are ready, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor McEachran,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Lombardi,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock,
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Thank you. Today, as you may have seen, the flags fly at half-mast. Today is National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and this week is National Police Week, both created to pay special recognition to law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. I'd like to take a moment before the Pledge of Allegiance to honor the role of law enforcement in service to society by recognizing the sacrifices and valor of law enforcement and the efforts of our own police department in educating the community and making it safe for those who serve and for all of us. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, acceptance of minutes. I'd wait a motion to approve the April 17th, 2023 City Council meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And now, public comment. We have first Paige Trace on the topic of Portsmouth.
Paige Trace, 27 Hancock Street. With all due respect. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as a past city councilor, I have to wonder what the heck you were thinking last Monday evening. You adjourned the budget presentation of the city manager, her most important evening of the year, and then turned around and had 2 illegal meetings of a quorum the same night in the same bar. Go figure. There were 6 councilors total: Bagley, Blaylock, Cook, Denton, Lombardi, and Tabor, involved in discussing city business. As a resident, I have to wonder at the disingenuous actions of these 6. And this was not a chance encounter. So you were baking a cake? Who gets to ice it? I guess we'll never know. With no meeting minutes, no agenda, no meetings posted to begin with, where were you acting on behalf of the residents? Councilor Lombardi, did you know that your voice resonates when you care about something? Even in a crowded bar. Somehow, I'm guessing residents will understand if I tell them you weren't discussing lilac varieties. So here we are, time to brush up on state law, I guess. A meeting held in bad faith to do business by a quorum with no minutes taken, no agenda, and not posted. Socializing, not an excuse, has consequences. The Assistant State Attorney General has a PowerPoint on this issue with an explanation of penalties, should they be appropriate. Attorney Sullivan, one of your old friends, retired attorney partner Robert Ciandella, wrote a fabulous brief on this matter. Perhaps you might hand it out. As I'm reasonably sure you didn't authorize this, to Mayor McEachran, Assistant Mayor Kelly, and Councilor Moreau, with due respect, thank you for not being part of this city council's embarrassingly arrogant, thought-provoking after-hour meetings. But 3 is not a majority. 6 is on questions of residents' money. And one last thing, other than this, to the entire city council, when choosing an entire street for one restaurant's personal use, at the expense, of course, of city residents, do fires or heart attacks understand why you close the street for the personal gain of one? Please tell the person who's having the heart attack. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Next up, Peter Huda, Prescott Park Agreement and question.
Peter Huda, 280 South Street. My questions are on, first one's on page 4, number 13, property requirements, utilities and taxes. All utilities, water, sewer, electricity, fire alarm, monitoring, and natural gas with the use of a licensed area and schedule shall be paid by the city. My question is, why are the taxpayers picking up the utilities for Prescott Park? Next question, page 14 is the first one. This is on Schedule A. And under the tables and chairs, there is not a number. I attended a concert last year, and I was surprised to find out that the tables have migrated down into the front area there. So that's why this is concerning to me. There's no numbers defined here. And if you go down to number E, it's the same thing. The number of tables and chairs on the table and chairs areas A and B must not exceed occupancy limits established for life safety. What are the numbers? This is scheduled to be put before you tonight. It would be really nice if the residents had an idea of what they were paying for here and why. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next up, Sue Polidora on the budget.
Sue Polidora, Middle Street, and I want to thank you all for your very long session today. I'm sure you are tired. I am tired for you, knowing that you have another big, long meeting ahead of you. I'll think about you, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I came in this morning, and I listened to the presentation of the IT department. And as so many of you, several of you commented, that there is an increase for contracted services that went from $210,000 last year to $540,000 this year. At the same, it is a budget that we were expecting a reduction, we were told last year, if we increase the headcount so they can bring the services in-house. Several of you did ask the questions this morning. It was a good question to ask. So if we are, the IT departments, many corporations tend to grow very large, very fast because of interface of other systems. Every time you have an interface, every time you have a system that needs to connect with other system, you need a manager to manage that because many programs are not good at talking to each other without some sort of intervention. So looking at that budget, there's also a line item in there for other operating costs, which has an increase of $100,000. I'm not sure what other operating cost is. I understand that there is also similar smaller scale IT departments in several other departments in the city, like fire, police, what have you. This department's going to be merged, since we're building up the IT department, it's going to be merged together, so everybody will have an area of expertise, but everybody will be under the same, category, under the same department. Couldn't tell. So the more systems there are, the more people will be required. I noticed that the training budget is also going up, which I assume is training new people or training people in new systems that were discussed. I mean, I have no objections about new systems, especially when it comes to malware. You have seen cities shut down because of it. And so many legislators, many people that have to make the decision you have to make, think about it, the what ifs. If I don't support this department, what if something happens? I don't want to be blamed. It's something that could happen if we didn't do this beforehand. That's a great question. Those are great concerns. But they are dedicated people that do this every single day that we should be relying on rather than building our own departments in-house. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Next up, Esther Kennedy on the topic of a CSO.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. Tonight I come before you. First, I would like to request that you honor Sue Polidero's request to do the Declaration of Independence reading, and also the Brewsters for Blessing of the Fleet. I think those are two very worthwhile events for our city. I come to you before you because I'm worried that I have not received anything on CSOs. And recently we had a major rain event. And I'm very fortunate to live by the outlet of the pond. And I can usually tell by turbidity, smell, other things that things are happening. And we receive no information on that. So I'm in belief that there was an event. I guess I'm asking for some information on what's happening. I also saw that we're honoring Newcastle, and I understand that agreement. I just hope that we really consider what's happening in our wastewater treatment plant. We have a couple pumps down. We have a lot of stuff going on. I know there's been a lot of things happening over there. There's been a lot of lights at night. And this morning, a big truck was heading out and almost ran into people because he was on a mission. So, with a city emblem on the side. So I just really want to know where we're at with our CSOs, if we've stopped letting people know. None of us got any monitoring. We had a huge rain event, so the expectation would be there is one. And there was a lot of turbidity, and there was a lot of stench, and it seemed like traditionally what we have when we have a CSO event. So please let us know and let the public know what's going on with the treatment plant. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Don't see anybody with their hands up on Zoom. Seeing no other readers, we will move on to the first reading of ordinance. First read. This is a long ordinance. First reading of ordinance amending Chapter 10, Article 5A, Character-Based Zoning, Section 10.5A20, Regulating Plan, Subsection 10.5A21.10, Contents of Regulating Plan, Map 10.5A21B, Building Height Standards, Section 10.5A43.30, Building and Story Heights, Subsection 10.5A43.33, Section 10.5A43.40, Maximum Building Footprint, subsections 10. Yeah, that's subsections 10.5A43.41-44 and Section 10.5A45, Community Requirements to Receive Incentives to the Development Standards, subsections 10.5A46.21-22 and Article 15 Definitions, Section 10.1530, Terms of General Applicability. I'd wait a motion to pass first reading and refer to the Planning Board for report back and further schedule a public hearing and second reading for July 10th. And
So moved.
Second?
And if we have that, would love to hear from, do we have to suspend the rules to hear from Nick on this? I'd like to hear from Nick tonight if we could. We have to. City Attorney,
presentation.
for a presentation. I'd wait a motion to suspend the rules to hear a presentation from.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Nick, would you care to share anything on this?
Welcome, Nick.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yep.
All right, I'm just going to shut the video off. I am on my phone, currently in Charleston, so bear with me. As outlined in that memo put together, this has largely come out of the Land Use Committee, and it's an effort of staff to really review the three different density incentives that we currently have in the larger downtown and in the character districts. And what we've done is looked at a number of projects that have come through the pipeline, some of them built, some of them under construction, and some of them still to come. And we were asked by, the Land Use Committee, and looking at our work plan for what we've been looking at for the last year and moving into the next phase of our work plan at the Land Use Committee, we're really focused on these incentives that have been on the books since essentially 2014. And the density incentives, for people that aren't familiar with it, we have an overlay district in the downtown, largely along the urban renewal areas in the north end, that allow developers to get an additional story of height and a larger building footprint and a few other so-called carrots or incentives in order to provide what we've called the sticks, or the public benefits of community space in a variety of forms, from wide sidewalks to parks to greenways to plazas to squares, as well as workforce housing. And that language has been on the books for the better part of 7 years, including the West End. And so we have an overlay district. We have properties that are large, more than 1 acre, that are outside the overlay district, that also have a series of density incentives that largely the carrot is to allow them to build a taller building in exchange for community space. And then we have our third density incentive, which is for properties that are either inside the overlay district or outside, that are seeking to do either at-grade or underground parking and would like to have a larger building footprint in order to support that underground or at-grade parking. Examples of that scenario would be the Brick Market that's recently almost completed there on Penn Hollow and Daniel Street. The applicant requested a conditional use permit to provide 30% community space, which is this, in the case of that project, wide sidewalks as well as the alleyways and the park space in the middle of that development coming off Market Square. In exchange for a larger footprint, they were allowed to exceed the as-of-right size of the building footprint in exchange for that community space. The AC Hotel did the same thing with the parking that, in their case, is not underground, it's at grade. They have a liner building along Vaughn Street, but they have a footprint there of 40,000 square feet, which was 10 more than what was allowed in the overlay district. So we've looked at these, again, recently approved or under construction, or projects that have completed construction, to evaluate and challenge a lot of the assumptions folks are making in the community about whether the trade we're getting or making with a applicant is a fair trade and is meeting the sort of goals and objectives of the city and its vision plans that were put in place to inform that zoning. And what we've largely found, although it's imperfect and difficult to evaluate the quality and character of community spaces that haven't yet been created, because typically the building goes first and the community space comes in towards the end of the construction. And in the case of the north end, it comes in after all the properties are assembled and we've designed and permitted a greenway along the North Mill Pond. It's difficult to see the public benefits when the building is already in place, and there's a lag before that greenway gets created. So we've looked at these three incentives, and we've looked at work that's been done on properties like the McIntyre properties that aren't even before us yet, like Citizen Bank, which someday that property may get redeveloped. It's over 1 acre in size. There are about 8 properties actually in the downtown area that would qualify for the incentive of so-called large properties. So we've tried to take a pass at sort of all 3 levels: the stuff that's on the ground, the stuff that's under construction, the stuff that's been approved and not yet started, and then the stuff that isn't here yet, to see if it makes sense for us to recalibrate sort of the carrots and sticks in these incentives to do a better job in achieving the kinds of public benefits that the public has expressed through both the Charette's envisioning process as well as, you know, strategic plans like looking at the McIntyre, which is highly focused, and looking at what's happening off of Market Square, and looking at what happened on the corner of Havenport and High Street, looking at all these projects and seeing if what we're asking for is enough, is too much. It's pretty clear to everybody on the council, and I think in the community by now, everybody knows we've not achieved one workforce housing unit as a result of our density incentives since 2013 when we first passed the character-based zoning. So we know that there's something wrong with the math in the model or the ordering or weighing of public benefits, because we haven't achieved any. And what we're attempting to do with these amendments is to move forward from that evaluation process of those 4 development types, and the conclusions or findings that we've come to, that, you know, there's too little workforce housing, there's maybe too little high quality community space, or we want more of that. I think there's a need for better municipal control over our own destiny. And if you look at, sorry about that, if you look at the 3 density incentives, only one of them requires a conditional use permit right now. The other 2 are as of right. So we're sort of handicapped at the planning board in evaluating the so-called trade for the density incentive when it's as of right and there's no conditional use permit. And if we want workforce housing, we know in New Hampshire under the RSA, we need a conditional use permit. So we are proposing in this amendment that we shift all 3 incentives to a conditional use permit. So we really have 2 hands on the wheel. We can evaluate the quality of both the workforce housing and or the community space that's being proposed, and make sure the community, as evidenced through its permit granting authority, feels like you know, the performance standards have been met and that conditional use permit should be granted. So you're looking at 5 amendments in this bundle. I'm almost done. The first one relates to the larger parcels, again, over 1 acre in size, anywhere in the character districts that are outside the overlay districts along the North Mill Pond. The second relates to building footprint increases similar to what the AC Hotel did for the parking. The third is for the overlay district itself, which includes everything on the North Mill Pond in the north end and the west end. The proposal is to require both community space and workforce housing in order to get that incentive for a taller or bigger building. The fourth of 5 amendments is to add some additional community space types. When we started this zoning in 2013, we had 7. We expanded it to 9 in 2014. We expanded it when we did the gateway districts to 13. That's what we currently have, 13 different community space types. We're proposing, as a result of all the hard work that was done on a project like the McIntyre community plan, that it makes sense for us, if we're going to go in here and make some adjustments, that we add at least 3 more types, which would handle a roof, public roof observation deck, an arcade, sort of a covered but open, one-sided arcade along the edge of a building, along a street, similar to what you have on 46 Maplewood at Deer Street and Maplewood, and also have passageways, you know, sort of a tunnel that might connect through a building to public spaces. So we're proposing in the fourth of 5 amendments to introduce those 3 community space types. And then the 5th and final amendment in that packet is to adjust the building height along Bow Street between Penn Hollow and Chapel Street. And there was a lot of discussion over the last at least 4 years about the 45 feet being on the high side of what most people felt it should be between Penn Hollow and Chapel Street. The existing building next to the McIntyre is well below 45 feet, the wood frame 2.5-story building on the corner of Chapel and Bow. So this proposal, simply unlike what we were doing on Congress Street 6 or 7 months ago, going up 5 feet, this is dropping 5 feet to a 3-story building instead of a short 4th, and from 45 feet down to 40. So the entire McIntyre property and the entire block around Chapel Street, which includes other properties, are all 3 stories and 40 feet as a baseline condition. So that's what's before you in this packet, and those citations you rattled off as an introduction to this conversation. And the goal is to get to the planning board, continue the discussion, and bring something back that likely will have some adjustments through the public process, but that's a summary of what we're trying to do and why.
Thank you very much, Nick. Any questions from the council? Got a couple myself. Councillor Tabor, and then you had to hand up first, and then Councillor Denton.
Yeah, I want to vote for this. I'd love to see it move forward. This focuses on the downtown, but all credit to the Land Use Committee. They are working systematically through the zoning for all parts of the city. It's downtown's turn. There may be lots more opportunities to incentivize affordable housing in the gateway districts and other parts of town. But for the downtown, Nick's right, we're batting 0-0-0 in getting affordable housing. So this focuses on the use of the carrot of an extra story in height in exchange for affordable housing. The easy way out for a developer is to just do some public space. It doesn't cost much. And currently, by right, they then get the extra story. I really like the idea of making affordable housing a requirement and making it a conditional use permit so that the planning board can work with that project. The question for the city attorney, I know there was some discussion that if the developer of a project didn't want to do the affordable housing, could we require instead that they make a payment in lieu of affordable housing, which could go into the Affordable Housing Fund? Is that?
We've been looking at that. At this point, we don't believe that a payment in lieu would be appropriate or legal, but we're looking at other cities and towns and seeing what they require when they have impact fees, which is also sort of a payment in lieu of, and where the line would be. So we're still considering that.
Right. I mean, I have a friend who in this 1970s lived in Bow Street for $300 a month. And, that world is gone. And we have developers rushing in to build high-rent apartments or condos. And it seems to me that if they're going to get that very great return on investment, the payment in lieu could help us build a housing fund because we need to make other parts of town affordable. So that'd be a question I'd hope the planning board would look at with legal advice. Another idea that came up in Councilor Moreau's committee was should we go higher than 10% affordable housing in a project that has a large number of units, like over 50? In other words, a kind of scale of maybe it's 10% for a small project, but it's 20% for a larger project. And I thought that idea had some legs, and I hope it gets discussed. And lastly, the changes for parcels larger than 1 acre, I think Nick has crafted something that really takes all the public input around McIntyre and translates it into carrots and sticks that could get us as much as 50% community space, the arcades, the plazas, the observation decks, all those things that we've heard from the public that they would love to have and that make a better downtown. So I'm just was really excited about that.
If I may.
Councilor Moreau. I feel like you're gonna.
I've made the poor legal department jump through a lot of hoops about the payment in lieu. Attorney Court and I have had long chats about this, and I am on the pathway of working towards us being able to do all of the background work that we have to do in order to try to create that. But you're going to have to give us some time. We are also in the process of hiring consultants to actually do the financial analysis so that we can actually start to mold our workforce housing laws around the actual numbers that would make sense, that would actually make sense both for the people renting, buying, and building. So once we have those, I think we'll be better informed. This was our short-term fix to be able to try to get something, since what we did originally back in 2013, 14, whenever we did that, wasn't working. And this will actually affect all character districts, right? It doesn't affect just the downtown, but wherever the character districts are. So it is my hope that this will be a short-term fix till we really can do the deep dive into the numbers and into all the research that we need to do to create that, to try to create a housing trust, to try to create all of, the trustees and all of the laws that we need to build and the information we need to build that. So long-term plan is exactly what you're asking for.
And thank you for all the great work on this. I mean, it's real pick and shovel work, rebuilding our ordinances to get the public benefit where we wanted it. It's just great work.
Councillor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to make sure that I understand the intent when it comes to workforce housing correctly, just based on the wording here. So when it talks about renting units, it's a household with an income of no more than 60% of the area median income for a 3-person household. When it comes to sale, it talks about a household with an income of no more than 100% of the area median income for a 4-person household. When we specifically say 3-person and 4-person household, is that precluding us from doing smaller units like studios, 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, or is this locking us into 3 and 4-person? Does that question make sense?
It does.
Councilor Moreau.
Yeah.
Wants to bite this apple again?
It does. So we took the minimum size of 1,000 square feet down to 600 square feet. And when you're talking 3-person, it could be with a child. So you could still get a 2-bedroom and have a 3-person household. It's not all the income bearers in the household. It's just 3 people actually living in the space. So, so I think that because this is all going to be done through a conditional use permit, if smaller units make sense, and they can go to the planning board and ask for that, and maybe it's a mixtures, but right now we've set the minimum at 600 square feet.
And I think 600 square feet is actually a decent amount of space. Most of the houses at Atlantic Heights are less than 600 square feet, and my studio is smaller than 600 square feet. I just wanted to make sure I understood where the 3-person and 4-person came in.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Councillor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to thank Councilor Moreau, Assistant Mayor Kelly, and city staff. I mean, Nick Cracknell, they've been doing a lot of work on this. But I know I believe this is really the first zoning change we've made to really incentivize workforce housing. I know that's a goal of all of us up here. And I know we all know the need for workforce housing in Portsmouth. But when it comes to, it's much harder for us as a council to build it. It's a lot easier for us to make zoning changes to incentivize it. So I believe that's what we're doing here. I'm really excited about it.
Thanks, Councillor Blaylock. Anything else? I'd like to pass the gavel because I'd like to talk about this a little bit. Sorry.
Does mean I can't talk?
You can gavel me.
He's already been beeped.
Yeah, been beeped. Yeah, gavel. So I very much appreciate what's gone into from the Land Use Board. Land Use Board, councilors, also the planning board members on there, city staff. Really impressed that Nick was able to concisely explain all of that. He's very passionate about this, so it's great to hear that passion come through not only the phone, but in changes that I think are effective to make sure that Portsmouth is better because of them. I do have one question that I would like potentially to be continued to thought out at the planning board, and I want to pose it so that from a first reading standpoint, if it is taken up at planning board and there's a change that is brought back, it's possible to include into second reading. So when it comes to workforce housing, I think that the idea that what we had on the books wasn't working was correct, but maybe not from an incentive standpoint, because it was an or. It was, either build this thing that you can only rent out at less money, or a community space that can be all sorts of things, but doesn't cost you that much to build. I think by making it and is a huge step in the direction that we're going to get. And then by switching it from as a right to a conditional use permit is another huge step. And these are, the world is driven by, things that seem small at the time but are enormous. If there is a requirement to come before our land use boards to present a project, and it's no longer talking about it from a standpoint of this is a right that I have to build, but this is something that has to be approved as part of a conditional use permit, I think that there's a lot more that we can get. And to that end, since a lot of these will be negotiations that happen on the planning board and trade-offs, I would like to see any input from the planning board about increasing that starting off point at 20% from 10%. Knowing that all of these are trade-offs, and if the idea is that, the numbers aren't going to work at 20%, then I understand that. But if they could work at a project for 15%, but maybe not another project at 10%, I'd like us to be able to grab that extra 5%. So knowing that these would be conditional use permits, I hope that we can send this to the planning board with the idea that since it's not an outright and that it's going to come before a board that's going to be swayed by all the beautiful amenities that would be included in a project, I'd like to be able to start from that standpoint and at least hear from the planning board if this is something that we could come back and discuss. I don't think I have to make that a motion, City Attorney.
I don't think so. Just
Okay.
trying to follow.
So it wasn't a motion. It wasn't certainly delivered in a motion. But if I would like to see the conversation from a planning board that they're going to look at this before we take up its second reading, if they would make a change to 20%, we could still have second reading on this as presented tonight, correct?
Well, I'm going to have to process that question. I've been thinking about that, whether that would be a substantial change, but you're putting it out there in notice to the public tonight, so I think you're headed in the right direction. I can't give you an affirmative answer right now.
Councilor Moreau.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Just look right at her. I actually asked the question about going up to 20%, and it was sort of just, I didn't really think about the whole process of that because it is a conditional use permit, then we could negotiate down from that 20%. So I'm actually all in favor of doing that. We were just thinking we should really have the numbers that we're going to get from our financial analysis to really make sure that that's a doable thing was what our discussion went around. I am more than happy to present that possibility at planning board since I will be part of those discussions as well. And to try to come back with that. And we also planned out the date that it's coming back for second reading to give us enough time from the June planning board meeting to make notice of any material changes. So we have all of that already thought out.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll pass the gavel back.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. All right, well, the motion on the floor is to pass first reading and refer to the planning board for report back and further schedule a public hearing and second reading for the July 10th city council meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes. Thank you very much. Okay, next I will await a motion to bring forth the letter. Where is this? Where are we on the?
Your Honor, presentations and written communications.
Is that?
13C.
Yeah, 13C for.
13C.
Okay. Yep. We'll bring forth. I'd wait a motion to suspend the rules to bring forth item C under section 13, Town of Newcastle Sewer Agreement.
Your Honor, can I offer a friendly amendment to that motion for it to be 13C followed by 13B, since we have audience members waiting to present that one as well?
Oh, okay.
B comes after A, though. I mean, in the order of,
So you have
it
to
would be good to hear A before B.
Oh,
So do C, A, B.
So we do them all?
Why don't we just start with this one?
yeah.
Can we do, we'll do CAB, and then we'll go back to the city manager's action items? Is that all right? So I'll take the CAB. It's first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Your Honor, Deputy City Manager Woodland would like to provide an introduction to 13C, if you okay with that?
It's great. You don't have the buzzer on for her.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Suzanne Woodland, Deputy City Manager, and also standing here in my sort of regulatory council guise as well. So I am here tonight to really give you a brief introduction to this letter that you see from the town of Newcastle in your packet, along with a draft 20-year agreement with the town of Newcastle for a wholesale agreement for treatment of their sewage. The town of Newcastle, as you may know, operates its own wastewater collection system. It owns its own pipes and pump stations and other related infrastructure. What they don't have is a treatment plant. So Newcastle sends the wastewater collected to the Pierce Island Wastewater Treatment Facility. They have done this since at least the 1970s. Newcastle bills its sewer users. We do not bill them. We bill the town of Newcastle. We have a method that we've been using to understand the flowage and how much to charge them. Newcastle right now, its current rate is a little over $20, or maybe it's closer to $21, $20.80 is the nod in the back, which compared to Portsmouth, our user rates are $15.78. So Newcastle pays for the treatment of the wastewater, and then they have to add on to that because obviously they have their own infrastructure to maintain. So the city had a 30-year agreement with the town of Newcastle. That expired back in 2008, and we've been kind of limping along since then. So you might ask, why an agreement now? So really what it comes down to is regulatory compliance. So if you look at the draft agreement in your packet, you'll see that Newcastle is actually considered by the EPA as a co-permittee because of the way the wastewater comes into our facility, that they maintain their own system. This new agreement would make sure we set the flow limits. We will be able to implement, as the city implements its new programs under its new Pierce Island permit, which is coming out, as you know, it's out in draft form. We'll be going to an industrial pretreatment program, and we have other requirements. So you'll see in the draft agreement, there's an Article 6, which talks about coordinating with the new permit requirements. So it's really time to get this done. So we also have kind of been talking and working with an updated metering program, protocol, so that we can make sure we're accurately capturing the amount of flow that we're treating. So that's kind of where we are, and we've been planning for Newcastle's continuation of their flow as part of the Pierce Island upgrade. So there's no surprise here. It's really just time for really to do the paperwork and also to look at an updated rate. So Newcastle came to us quite some time ago, and their representatives are here tonight, and they really appreciate your moving this forward. So we do have representatives from the town of Newcastle here, from their select board and their sewer commission, to help answer questions about why they need this wholesale rate. Brian Getz has spent a lot of time working with our rate consultant to make sure that the rate that we are building in and the methodology that we're building in is fair to Portsmouth and its users, because we're an enterprise fund, and also that it will be flexible over time, so the agreement will allow it to be adjusted as part of the budget process and our usual rate model updates, which you are quite familiar with through our budget process. So this wholesale rate will kind of get updated along with our other rates. So that's really where we are. Newcastle, if they would like, could speak to some of the improvements that they need to do in their system, because as we all know, the regulations are getting more and more stringent, and they have upgrades that they need to do to their pipes and other infrastructure, particularly their pump stations, et cetera. So I will stop there, and like I said, we have representatives from Newcastle here. Brian Getz is here.
Is there any First question's for Suzanne. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just have a question around future, since this is a 20-year agreement, because we're in the process of stormwater, laying new stormwater pipe, and if the EPA comes down with a request for stormwater treatment, and we have to build a stormwater treatment facility, how can we guarantee with this agreement that we make sure that Newcastle, because clearly we don't make decisions for Newcastle, is also in compliance with that, with stormwater separation as needed for treatment?
So they do not have a combined system. So they do not have the same issues we have with CSOs.
Okay.
And the city has its own MS4 stormwater permit for stormwater that doesn't get caught up in our collection system. So their system collects really sewage only. Now, do they have infiltration issues like we do? And the answer is yes, and those are part of the improvements that we would expect them to be making. In fact, you'll see some language in there that talks about excessive flows from infiltration, because that is a common problem with older pipes. Yes, they're all nodding in the back. So, yes, we've had conversations with Newcastle for some number of years about various components of their system, so, yeah.
Councilor Bagley?
Thanks, Your Honor. And I've been struggling with this one quite a bit. I understand the document and I understand the case that's made that Newcastle can pay a lower rate than Portsmouth residents because they have to maintain their own sewer pipes to bring it to the Portsmouth point of contact. However, my understanding is the sewer users that are citizens of Portsmouth closest to where the Newcastle sewer pipes come into the city would be paying the full rate. They're not getting a discount. And the other problem I have is we, as a city, require that residents maintain their sewer pipelines to the city main. And this recently came up with the Union Street sewer project because Coffin's Court, which is not included in the federal requirements, is not getting done because the budget isn't there, and they can't have the city can't help them out because their sewer pipes run through private property, not on city property. So to me, it seems that from a city standpoint, we should charge Newcastle the same rate that we charge our residents.
Well, Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about a couple of those issues? Because I know you're, I think, familiar with the rates in our...
Yes.
I can...
Brian Getz, Director of Water Resources. Councilor, as stated by Deputy City Manager Woodland, the Newcastle pays over $20 a unit for their sewer. So they're like, she said they're basically charged the $15.78 plus, I believe, around $5 is added on by the town of Newcastle per unit for their customers. So their rate still will be, a Newcastle customer will still pay, considering that they'll likely keep the $5 above what is being charged by Portsmouth, the $11.78. So it would turn out to be, $16 or $17 a unit. So it still would be higher rate a Newcastle customer on sewer than a Portsmouth customer. And again, this recognizes the way the metering works and the sewer line. So Newcastle is responsible for that entire sewer line all the way to the Pierce Island wastewater treatment facility. So inside the headworks, there's a separate pipe and there's a separate meter, and that meter is where we capture the data now. That's a brand new meter with the new facility. So the added benefit of that is the accurate metering we'll have now. So it was discussed if they did have infiltration or they did have issues with a rainfall event that did actually up the flows. Those flows that weren't initially captured in that kind of event will all now be captured. So Newcastle, not only in the agreement, is responsible for reducing that volume they would have incentive as well, because they're going to have to pay for that in their monthly usage if it's up that much.
May I ask a follow-up? So maybe I'm misunderstanding, disregarding what any additional Newcastle charges there are. For 1 unit of sewer from Newcastle, would that be the same price as 1 unit of sewer from a resident that is located adjacent to where Newcastle enters our system?
The Portsmouth residents that are our customers on that line are going to pay Portsmouth rates. They always have. So their rates won't change.
But the Newcastle rate, is that more or less or the same?
It's less, $11.78, the wholesale rate. So we also have a water rate for Newcastle that is also a wholesale rate. We do for Rye Water District, similar on the water side, because basically, on the water side, we're providing the wholesale water, again, as explained by Deputy City Manager. The system itself is managed by the Rye Water District, the town of Newcastle on the water side, and the same on the sewer. Town of Newcastle is responsible for their pump station, all the electricity for those stations, all the customers, if they have issues with pipe breakage or anything, and their management of the system and all that, all the pipes in the town for sewer.
I'll ask a final question, not to belabor the point, but the way I look at it is the town of Newcastle is the same as any resident of Portsmouth. And just like a resident of Portsmouth, they're responsible for their sewer pipe to our system. And a resident of Portsmouth is now paying $15 and change per unit. It seems to me, and this is the part I don't understand, is why is Newcastle not paying that same rate?
Well, they have the customers in the sewer system just have a straight connection. It's a single connection. There are customers that have their own pump stations, and they're responsible for those. So our customers that have systems like that, all the cost of that is borne, it's usually by condo associations and that. So those fees, and if they have, just like your piping in your house or out to the street, is the responsibility of the sewer customer. So now the same with the town of Newcastle with their sewer lines.
So maybe that's a better analogy. If we have a condo, and I don't know if any of the condo associations in Portsmouth have what you call, like, say, a mini pump plant that then comes to the city line. Those condo associations, do they pay a wholesale rate like Newcastle, or do they pay a residential rate?
Just a residential rate.
So I'm still struggling then, I guess,
Well, they are not their own sewer system separate that has pump stations and the like. So included in the packet, we did have our rate consultant do this review, similar to what he's done on the water wholesale side. And, his analysis came up with that rate. So Newcastle had proposed a rate that was lower than that based on their analysis. The response back after review with our rate consultant was the recommendation of the rate that is proposed in this agreement.
Thank you.
Councilor Moreau.
Just to kind of connect, because I think way I understood, you just said that Newcastle pays for their pipe all the way to the station, right? All the way to Pierce Island.
Correct.
So if something happened to that pipe all the way to Pierce Island, they'd be responsible for it.
Yes.
Where our residents aren't.
Oh, so that was my misunderstanding. I thought their pipe connected to our pipe at, like, the town line.
They're going all the way to
All the way, the meter inside. So they're responsible up to the meter, the line.
Councilor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I noticed there's several points in this agreement where it talks about Newcastle hooking up new customers of their own. Do we know what percentage of their households are currently on sewer versus septic? And the only reason why I'm wondering is at some point a decree might come down saying, hey, everyone who's on septic this close to the water has to convert to sewer, and then we get a big rush of people signing up.
Good question. I will have to defer to someone from Newcastle to answer that one.
Thank you.
Mayor, council members, city manager, staff, thank you. Dave McGuckin, 141 Cranfield Street in Newcastle. Just to be completely wide open. I am no longer a selectman. I did not run for re-election this last time, but I was the representative from the Select Board to the Water Sewer Commission, so I've got some knowledge of it. Currently, 90% or more of the town is on a sewer line, as opposed to having septic tanks. I think there may be 40. It could be 50, it could be 30, but I'm going to say it's around 40. It's a very, very small number.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councilor Denton? So, I appreciate the work that's gone in to crafting what seems to be equitable. Equitable in the standpoint of right now, we're all kind of under the decree of the EPA, and they could choose to do what they want. And that's not a bad thing because of the fact that the EPA is looking to protect the body of water we all care very much about. And as it stands right now, my first question is, could we just take over all of this? And I don't know if Newcastle would be amenable to that situation. But when we math that out in our heads, we probably don't want to at this point, given the age. No disrespect to the water pipes in Newcastle. There's some work that needs to happen. But so far, the work has not been able to happen because in addition to paying for all of the work that we put into all of our pipes, and remember, our sewage rate is certainly getting to the end point and treating it, but it's making sure it's separated, making sure that all of the work to put in new sewer lines, maintaining all those lines in the streets is happening. That's included in our $15. And then we pass along that cost to Newcastle and expect them to also do that work in addition to the amount that we're charging for the city of Portsmouth. And so I think a wholesale price, at least in my opinion, reflects the fact that there's a lot of more work that needs to happen on Newcastle. My question for Suzanne, and it's difficult to compel future legislative bodies or select boards to do anything, but is there language in this agreement that states if for whatever reason that they decide, Newcastle decides not to do this work and just says, hey, we're not going to do this work, we don't feel compelled to do this, we would like to pay for this year our wholesale rate and not charge in addition? Is there language that requires this city or the town of Newcastle to spend at least as much as the retail rate of Portsmouth in future? Because I like this. This allows them the flexibility and the financial, but I would feel a little jaded if a future, not these select men and women, but a future body of Newcastle decided not to make that investment.
So a couple of responses to that. First, this agreement does have some provisions that protect Portsmouth in terms of flow limits, in terms of not allowing hazardous materials and others to come into the system, or if they do, there are obligations to chase it and figure out what it is. There are requirements to, as I said, to deal with the excess infiltration, which is a infrastructure, keep maintaining your infrastructure. As I also mentioned, that Newcastle is a co-permittee, so EPA is aware of sort of the condition, broadly speaking, I would say, of the infrastructure and the need for improvement. So could we maybe add some more language? Possibly. I think there are enough other indicia, and there's also, when you look at, and they could speak to it, some of the conditions of the pump station, because I remember when we did have conversations 7 or 8 years ago, where we looked and actually did some field visits. Some of those pump stations really need to be upgraded from a safety perspective. Like, they are very hard to maintain. I know they've made some improvements, but there are more to go. And when sewage starts to back up in your street, or when your pump stations flood because water's getting in, it provides its own incentive to make those infrastructure improvements.
Generally, that's not where you want to, save at some point because it comes back to haunt you. And we will say this, that actually Newcastle has made a huge investment in its water infrastructure. As some of you probably know, if you tried to drive through Newcastle while they were putting in the new water line, really part of that actually evolved from a number of conditions that they saw when they didn't have, the flow that they were looking for firefighting purposes. And they actually had some long conversations with the city of Portsmouth about the water system and how to work, with us and to help, make it more healthy for them and work for us as well. So I guess I'm not that worried because I think there are enough incentives both in the agreement, the regulatory environment, and just the nature of no one likes sewage where it shouldn't be. But I'm happy to entertain, adding something new, or if you want Newcastle to come up and maybe speak to that further. I haven't looked at their capital improvement plan, how they manage that, but so.
Maybe that would be, Mr. McGuckin, would you like to, as private citizen, that
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. To answer your question directly, we had a town meeting a week ago, and there are about 1,000 people in the town of Newcastle. And we had a large turnout for a variety of reasons. But this past town meeting was a culmination of a couple of years' worth of people understanding the infrastructure process in town. I mean, most people don't, they come in, they pay their bills, but do they understand in a small community like ours how things work? Fortunately, we've got a good water sewer commission who's made sure that our community does understand what works, but more importantly, what it costs. So whether the select board, to your point, 10 years from now, it's a select board who says, I don't think we can afford to do this anymore. The community would not let that happen. My sense is that with so few building lots, if any, left in Newcastle, and such little turnover in houses, the population of 1,000 today is probably going to be a population of 1,000 10 years, 20 years from now. In fact, unless people pass on or just decide to move south, the population, the same people are probably going to be there. So again, it's a long way of saying I don't think we're going to see much of a change in the philosophy of trying to improve the infrastructure, regardless of who's at the select board.
Is there bonded capital improvements that over the next 20 years would cause you to pay or continue to levy a tax rate or a water or sewer rate of $5?
Bill? Sorry. He's our finance.
Just with regard to that, the only bonded, we did bond the $5 million, what was an SRF loan? SRF loan for the $5 million, but it's actually on the tax rate because it was a public safety issue, so it was actually passed through that way. So the ratepayers currently don't have any bonded issues, with the exception of we just approved $100,000 for infrastructure improvements in the wastewater system, which coincidentally is going to be 100% forgiven because it's another loan as well. So we've taken care of that. We do have about $241,000 of money that we'll have to pay back related to a generator upgrade project for the 3 pump stations, but that's really what we have debt on the books right now. So no, to answer your question, I don't see any issues involving that unless we make a major upgrade, and then that $5 would go to pay for that bonding that we would do for future upgrades, not the current.
Right. So I am 100% convinced that Newcastle should be paying no more than Portsmouth in terms of the rates that we pay, and we understand that you currently pay $5 extra in order to maintain your island in terms of the collection there. It's hard to understand why we want to make sure you guys continue to make investments on that. We want to make it easier to make those investments. But it seems as though if there's not an acute need, it's possible that those investments are not made because they're not required, and folks we'd be in a situation where this council approved a contract that would allow ratepayers in Portsmouth to bond a $90 million sewage treatment plant that Newcastle benefits from, as we all benefit from, but is a big chunk of the reason why our rate is what it is. And that would be harder to explain if Newcastle on their total rate was paying less than Portsmouth. Understand we need to do this to make it so that you pay the same, but would feel more comfortable if there was language to the effect that you will continue to make investments in your sewer and water infrastructure, your sewer infrastructure, to make up the difference between the rate.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that, just so everyone's kind of aware of that rate structure, and I didn't formulate the rate structure, but some of that is our overhead for personnel and a variety of things that go into that system. So obviously it doesn't go all into capital.
Okay.
But a portion of that is dedicated to capital reserves, reinvestment in the system, whether that's through a bonding, whether that's through putting money in a capital reserve for a project we're doing. So I understand what you're saying. I can tell you, given the current situation and where we are, we're actually in the process of trying to make up for some of the past stuff. So we're investing probably even more heavily than, maybe the rate would allow, and we're actually charging to kind of push the limit to our users because we have so few users. There's only 1,000 residents. So we are truly putting as much money into the infrastructure as we can. I know what you're saying about the agreement. It's hard to kind of legislate, how much goes into what, depending on that mix. Sometimes it's a personnel mix. Sometimes it's an engineering mix. Sometimes it's infrastructure. So I guess what I would say is we're in a position where we're definitely focused on upgrading this, understand your concern, and I can tell you our focus is on investing in the infrastructure so that it's there, it's clean, and it's right.
Yeah, I mean, my concern isn't if it's, itemizing the costs, get that, and it takes a lot of money just to maintain what you have, understand that. Would love to be able to see something along the lines, it doesn't have to be, this is capital, and I'm not looking to, looking to be a friend and not anything but when it comes to that. But I want to make sure that from our constituents, that there's not to Councilor Bagley's concerns, there's not a situation where Newcastle, because of a wholesale rate, would end up paying less than a Portsmouth resident. It doesn't sound like that's the case from the expectation of what you're going to spend. But again, if Concord could have, compelled future legislators, we'd still be getting retirements, paid for in the city of Portsmouth. So I want to make sure, as best we can legally, with a document that we both agree to, that the cost borne by Newcastle would end up being into the no less than what Portsmouth is paying, at least for the years of the agreement.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that, and I think we could probably have that, those conversations and talk about what that looks like, because I don't think that would present a problem for us either. So.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councilor Bagley and then Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. In light of that, we only got the packet last week, and we're in the middle of budget season. Is it possible that we could table this to the next city council meetings? It seems like a pretty serious commitment on the council's part, and I would like to be able to ask more questions and have more time to consider an agreement of this magnitude.
If I may, I think it was the intent of staff and the town of Newcastle to bring it forward tonight for discussion and to come back. There was not an expectation it would be voted on this evening.
Oh, okay. Suzanne, would you like to speak to that?
Yes. So I'd be happy to work with the town of Newcastle and try to
Oh, at the next
capture-
city council meeting. Okay, that's the,
Yes.
okay, sure. I would like to, okay, sure.
and try and capture the concern. And yes, we, precisely because of expecting that there might be a conversation on this important topic, that you might need more than one meeting, yes, it was intentionally put under the letters section, the correspondence section, so that it could be brought forward by the city manager under her action items once we had this opportunity for you to hear from Newcastle and from staff and have this conversation. So happy to work with them and see what we can bring back perhaps by the next meeting.
All right, so
That was my
the
mistake.
same sample motion would work. Counselor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually, I just had a question. There's a clause, a termination clause, that I think maybe covers a lot of the concerns around compliance with the agreement, that either party can terminate with 60 days notice. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. It may not be entirely realistic in the sense of, there might be a lot of pressure not to just turn off, shall we say, the opportunity to treat from an environmental point of view. But yes, that clause is in there. But I think since Newcastle has indicated its willingness to kind of work with some of the concerns raised by this council, let's see what we can do in time for the next city council meeting and see if we can assuage those concerns.
Well, thank you to the select board. Would love to be able to, Councilor Moreau, do you have some?
I just have one last quick question for Deputy City Manager Woodland. I just want to make sure, as co-permittee, they are as liable to the EPA as we are to make sure that they're compliant.
They do have their own obligations, yes. Obviously, since they don't run the treatment plant, there's a place where their obligations exist under their collection system, to not have sewer overflows.
Right.
I.e., that's the piece you need to fix it when it gets broken.
That's, okay, perfect, thank you.
Very much appreciate the effort that's gone in to this. We'll take it up. I'd wait a motion to move to request city manager bring forth this wholesale sewer agreement for action at the next city council meeting.
So moved. Second.
And just to add that Councilor Bagley brings up fair points on the difference in rates. I think that given that this is directly to the sewer plant and we want to incentivize, or any plan should incentivize the natural work that needs to happen, the idea that there are ratepayers over there that have to pay our prices plus whatever is to maintain is the best interest of the Bay to make sure that we can come to agreement on that. So look forward to that next meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you again. Next up, the presentation regarding community health profile by Health Officer Kim McNamara.
Thank you, Mayor, Assistant Mayor, and City Council. I am very pleased to bring you a brief topical introduction to this profile and highlight just some of the demographics. There's much more that is in the profile itself, which is a 69-page document that will be posted immediately after this presentation, and which I believe the city manager sent to you today via email. This profile is the first phase of a three-step process of understanding the public health status of Portsmouth, assessing the unmet needs, and developing a community health improvement plan from a municipal perspective and with a vision of more equitable and inclusive health and well-being outcomes for all of Portsmouth's residents. According to the U.S. Census, Portsmouth's population in 2021, which was the last year that complete compiled information was available, was 21,897 residents. Our smallest group is our children. Our smallest age group is our children under 5. Our largest is our demographic of 35 to 54-year-olds. And we have a pretty sizable group of seniors in Portsmouth, 65 plus. When you go to the community health profile that's online, you will also see these figures compared to Rockingham County, New Hampshire, and the United States. These are the demographics for Portsmouth race statistics, and it shows that 87.7% of our population identifies as white. There are 5.3% that identify as 2 or more races, 0.96% as other, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander 0.04%, Asian American, 4.6%, American Indian, Alaska Native, 0.23%, and Black or African American, 1.1%. And even though those numbers are small, the next slide will show you how diverse our school system is. So in our Portsmouth schools, there are 21 languages other than English spoken in homes. You add English to this list, and there's 22. And behind these numbers behind these students are family members, often extended family members, and also we have industries that have persons that also speak other languages. So Portsmouth has more diversity than those first numbers might appear. This next list are those languages that are spoken in Portsmouth schools, everything minus the English. So this is just to give you an idea of the real broad variety that we have. The median household income of Portsmouth compared to Rockingham County, New Hampshire, in the United States. In Portsmouth, the median household income is $91,915. It's less than Rockingham County, but substantially more than New Hampshire in the United States. And yet the federal poverty line in 2021, a one-person household was $13,788, a three-person, $21,599, and a 9 or more person household, and that's not just roommates living together, that's related parties in a home, $56,325. So you can see a big discrepancy there between the federal poverty line and the median income here in Portsmouth. This first graph shows poverty by age in Portsmouth, and you can see it is fairly evenly distributed across the ages. However, the largest percentage of residents living below the poverty line in Portsmouth are seniors. The second graph there is poverty by race, and given our low diversity, these percentages of residents living in poverty by race shows clear disparity. You can see 19.5% of our Hispanic households are at or below the federal poverty line, and there's other figures there, but for white households, that's 6.2%. Poverty by education is also a clear indication that educational attainment affects poverty in Portsmouth. So persons that are living at or below the federal poverty line that have a bachelor's degree or higher are I'm sorry, I can't read that. It got cut off.
2.7.
Thank you, 2.7%. And as the education increases, so does the attainment of education that leads to getting out of poverty or not being in poverty. So 47.1% of people who didn't graduate from high school are below that federal poverty line. So education really shows up as a great predictor there. Disability, 9.9% of Portsmouth residents report as having a disability. There's a variety and various figures. Some people may have more than one disability, and that's actually often the case. So these numbers don't all add up to 9.9%, but overall we have about 10% of our population that is disabled. Veterans was some of the most interesting and worrisome, honestly, figures that came out of this community health profile. 7.1% of total Portsmouth population are veterans. 10.8% are women, and that's a higher percentage than Rockingham County, New Hampshire, and the United States. We have a higher percentage of older veterans than Rockingham County, the state of New Hampshire, and the United States. With Portsmouth veterans, nearly 40% possess a bachelor's degree or higher compared to Rockingham, New Hampshire, and the United States. But Portsmouth has a higher percentage of veterans living below the federal poverty line than in Rockingham and New Hampshire. And a 2016 study of New Hampshire had a significantly higher rate of suicide among veterans than the national rate, which was 36 per 100,000 in New Hampshire compared to 31.7 per 100,000 in the United States. Detailed information at the county or city level on this is not available. The most common cause of elevated blood lead levels and lead poisoning in children is from old lead paint in their homes. Effects of lead can be permanent, particularly for young children, leading to attention deficits, developmental delays, behavioral challenges, fine and gross motor difficulties, and other things. It can also lead to death. Between 2017 and 2021, 40 Portsmouth children were found to have elevated blood lead levels at 3 micrograms per deciliter or higher. And this is the CDC reference level, which means that these children are in the top 2.5% of the nation's children with having the highest levels of lead in their blood. We don't know that they were all elevated from living in Portsmouth, but even if they weren't, they're here now. And there's great implications for their lives and for educational services and for social services and other services down the road. So we're looking very carefully at this. Yet since 2020, 31% fewer Portsmouth children from 12 months to 23 months and 38% fewer 24 to 35-year-old months were even tested. So there's been a significant drop in testing, even though that we have numbers of children that need to be tested and need to be followed up. So I have a few recommendations based on what we know so far in the profile and what we are doing through the needs assessment. So this 3-phase process of this profile, which gives us the overall demographics of the city, wherever data is available and reliable. Then the second phase is the community health needs assessment, and we're right in the middle of that. We've been working on that for a few months now, and it's really highlighting some very serious needs across Portsmouth, and I believe the next speakers are going to address some of those. And then there's a community health improvement plan, which is the last leg of it, and that's based on the findings of the profile, the needs assessment, and that is something that is done with stakeholders at the table and all the people that actually help or do public health in Portsmouth, which all of your social service agencies, your healthcare facilities, your educational facilities, there's a lot of work that goes into public health in Portsmouth, and they're all part of that. So my first recommendation is to retain money so that when the community health improvement plan is done, all of these really vulnerable populations have a chance at getting some improvements made once their needs are identified and solutions are found. So for the outcome of the community health profile, needs assessment, and the improvement plan, I'd like the council to consider retaining $3 million so that programs and services can be implemented, solutions can be found from that 12 million ARPA funds, because there were 4 main principles when ARPA first came out, and one of those was to look at inequitable health care and social situations for our most vulnerable populations. I would also recommend that the City Council provide a mechanism for nonprofits that provide services to Portsmouth's vulnerable residents so they can make their needs known to the City Council. And also, my final recommendation is that if we apply a health in all policies approach to city policy and development and planning, that incorporates health considerations of all residents within this community, and it will ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are protected throughout the planning process, so that every decision, every infrastructure investment, everything that the council decides on, if we just consider the health of all residents, even those that are most marginalized. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Are there any questions down this side? Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Kim, for this report. And I was looking at the community needs health assessment before the meeting. There's a lot of interesting data in there, but there wasn't enough time before the meeting to go through it all. Just a quick question on the lead testing. Since 2020, it looks like there's been a great reduction in testing. Is that because of COVID and we're going to see that return to previous levels, or is there other factors at work there?
Well, COVID certainly had an effect. There was also a national recall of test kits, the point of care testing in the doctor's offices. So all of that combined, but there's also not as much awareness. Sometimes if children miss their testing, which is generally recommended at 1 year and 2 years old, they feel like it's too late. They've gone past that date, and it's not true. It's still important to get a baseline. It's still important to know if children are being exposed to lead. And so there's multiple reasons for that. COVID was certainly one of them.
And just to follow up, I do think as a city we might want to consider how to improve that. Just because Portsmouth has so many old homes, lead paint might be a bigger issue here than other communities.
Should I respond?
Sure. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And we are talking with Chief Building Inspector Shanti Wolf about this issue. And so, lead inspections are part of a solution, but lead testing is part of the solution, education, outreach. And where we do have families that have some potential language barriers, outreach in languages that people can understand about this issue is also an important piece of it.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I thank you for highlighting the need for lead level testing. I'm one of those parents who had a child who developed some, lead levels because of living in antique homes. Because every time you open a window, the lead paint dust goes everywhere, and I had a child who was a thumbsucker. So we had to monitor our daughter. So this impacts. I think it's important for people to realize this impacts everyone. If you live in a house that's older than the 1970s, you likely have had lead paint in your house at some point. So thank you for highlighting this and the need for making sure that children are getting testing. I know that pediatricians used to do that, but we can't rely on everyone to have a pediatrician to go
That's
through.
right.
So my question is on the community health improvement plan. When do you anticipate finishing that plan? I know that you're requesting ARPA funds, and we just have a time limit for expending those funds. So I want to make sure that we're within that time limit.
Yes, thank you. So the needs assessment comes first, and that will be completed by August 1st, and the community health improvement plan will be worked on from August through December.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kim. Next up, we'll have the second part of this, the presentation from the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force.
Hello there. I'm Abby Frank. And I'm Kathy Beebe. And we are here to represent the COVID Response Task Force. And we came in December to present to you guys, but we're back. So we had some time to meet again and come up with kind of a streamlined list of ideas. So we were given the task about a year ago of coming up with ways to help recover from COVID, in particular look at high impact, low cost ideas and solutions. So when we were here, you can go to the next slide. When we were here in December, we kind of outlined some ideas that we had, the main issues that we saw in the community. Transportation, mental health, workforce shortage, childcare, housing, and substance misuse. So when we took all of those and looked at the problems and solutions, we came up with some really big solutions that were way out of kind of our scope and sequence. And so we kind of tried to pare it down to things that you could do now. So action items, things that would actually make a big impact on our community in those areas. So next slide. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. One of the first ones is if you've ever looked up the Community Resource Network, you can Google it. It's a great resource. Families First is part of that, and it has hundreds of nonprofits in the Portsmouth area. The problem is it's a PDF that you download, and so it's pages and pages. And so the idea being maybe ARPA funds could be put towards making that user friendly. So you could go in a search bar, you could look for substance misuse or whatever it is you're looking for, childcare, and actually find a nonprofit and click on their website. So something like that could really make a difference to residents of Portsmouth. Another piece that we thought of was working with the rec department. Todd is doing a great job coming up with programs for residents, both children and seniors. but really expanding the program, summer programs, scholarships, expanding program for our seniors, because as Kim said, we know that there are a lot of seniors in this community, and COVID really hit them hard in terms of losing services and getting to programming, so providing opportunities for them to really feel like they're part of the community. Something that kept coming up was, so I'm a speech pathologist at Little Harbor, and I run a few different programs over there, but the idea that I'm running them there because it was something that I was passionate about, but they don't trickle over to the other 2 elementary schools, and they really should. So when I was talking to other nonprofit leaders at the table, and they were like, well, who coordinates that? Well, nobody. There's nobody that coordinates that. That job doesn't exist. So we have wonderful programs at our schools. We have wonderful programs in our community, rec department, and we have lots of families that need these programs. But for example, when I'm working on getting a student into an art program over at community campus, which is wonderful, they speak Portuguese, so we need to translate everything. And it's a lot for our ESOL teacher to do and our guidance counselor, and I'm helping, and it's multiple text messages, and we're happy to do it, but we don't have the time to do it. So creating a dedicated position that there could be a person who is helping district-wide students get into programs that would help with mental health, help with the family dynamics, is something that we were thinking about. Another thing that Kim actually already mentioned is creating a streamlined process for nonprofits to access ARPA funds for programming they're already doing. Because something we realized sitting around the table was that a lot of these programs already exist. We don't need to create a lot of new things, we just need to fund them so that people can access them. And then one that we kept getting bogged down with was transportation. It is a huge issue. And I can again speak from the school lens. We have 3 buses. One of our drivers needed to have shoulder surgery, so all week, for the last 2 weeks, we only had 2 because there are no substitute drivers. So kids were arriving late to Camp Gundalo, they were arriving late to their art class at the community center. So because they're arriving late home because we don't have enough transportation. So that a lot of times we got stuck down in ideas here. We had, buying vans to share, different things like that, but maybe creating a think tank of individuals who actually have that expertise on transportation and letting them tackle that could be a good idea for going forward.
So continuing on, there's some other kind of small ideas that the committee had, looking at gas and Uber Lyft vouchers to facilitate transportation to after-school programs, mental health appointments, et cetera, getting groceries, scholarships for CDL licenses and early childhood education certificate programs. But one of the things that, as Abby was saying, one of the things that was really challenging was obviously the issues that were identified are big issues facing residents of Portsmouth. And although it's great to come up with some small, low cost, kind of high impact, they're really not addressing that longer term issue of really supporting the growth and the opportunity to address these problems. So we really appreciated Kim from the health department coming to several of our meetings to kind of concur with what we were coming up with as the needs that we were seeing on a regular basis, and really looking at how do we, knowing that there's already some great work happening, how do we really get to the heart of addressing some of these challenges and making it better for residents of Portsmouth. So the think tank, I think, is a really important idea because you do have a lot of expertise, you do have a lot of great programming that's happening, and there needs to be some maybe better coordination of that. Really supporting the health department's plan that they're coming up with in terms of really looking strategically at how we can collectively address what's going on, and really just kind of the mechanism of understanding how the city can support the nonprofits that are doing some of this work, because Portsmouth is fortunate that there's many nonprofits here, right here in Portsmouth, that are addressing all of these issues that have come up. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. But how is it that we do more? And is there a mechanism to support the work that's already being done to grow that versus some of the smaller things that it's great. I think it's important to look at the stuff that the committee has come up with as in terms of some short-term ideas for spending some of this money, but this goes beyond the COVID money that's available. This goes beyond what we as a city, and I'm a resident of the city, what we really need to do to address these major issues impacting the residents. So I'll turn it back over to Abby.
Yeah, well, I don't think I have anything else, but are there any questions?
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Kathy. Are there other questions? Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor, and thank you both, and to the whole task force. You all put a year of hard work in and came up with a lot of good ideas, and I think highlighted a lot of needs that COVID, that were already there, but COVID made worse. I will make a motion, and if I get a second, I'll speak to it. And I would move that we refer these lists of solutions to the city manager for a report back from staff on feasibility and details as to recommendations of any of these they think the city should go forward with.
Second.
And so I think you guys both highlighted, we went in with hopes that we could find some really high impact, low cost solutions. And there might be a few in here, but the challenges, particularly the transportation one, just came up pretty much every meeting, are so great that a lot of these issues can't be solved easily. But I do think we have a really good list to work with here of different things we can do. One of the ideas I personally like a lot is the library bookmobile, because I kind of envision it as taking our great resource, which is the local library, and eliminating that transportation component, because that bookmobile can go to all the different neighborhoods. And when it goes to those neighborhoods, it'll almost be like a neighborhood night out on a regular basis, and allow those kids that, have been not networking, let's say, because of COVID, and the seniors that have not been networking because of COVID, it'll hopefully draw them out of their homes. But I think there's a whole lot of great suggestions here. And we kind of stole an idea from the Land Use Committee about, we were thinking of the housing navigator in that position. And I think that's what kind of led to the idea of maybe the city could have a position for a year or two to help coordinate all the great nonprofits that we have here in town and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, and see if we can find some efficiencies and see if we can help them find different grants and different state and federal funding that they may not be big enough to identify and research themselves.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just have a question for Councilor Bagley. Do you envision kind of a time frame around this? I just want to make sure that we're addressing this in a timely manner, especially since we have also a health report coming as well.
I would defer to the city manager.
We would be happy to work in conjunction with what both presentations included, so certainly in the next few months.
Well, it seems like that vote will pass. But Kathy and Abby, it's a lot of work has gone into that. It's appreciated by the city of Portsmouth, and I would concur with your belief in both of those. In the case, this kind of started because the city got significant amount of money. While the city's job is to look after the safety and health and well-being, we end up doing a poor job at it if we were to try to be the nonprofit arm of that. We have great nonprofits, and to your point, Abby, when you were looking at somebody coordinating that, I feel like one of our biggest challenges in the city is making sure that the resident, not from like a promotion standpoint, but like there's honestly times when there's a service that somebody provides in the city, and our job is trying to connect people to that service. Sometimes we provide that service. It's a lot of great recreational activities that just don't happen or aren't aware to other folks, but there are so many missions and people willing to work on those missions that if, for want of a nail, and in this case, just the information about that service would be great. And a lot of people come to the city council, to the city manager. I like to call Joanna Deemer, our administrative official in the fourth floor, as the real mayor of Portsmouth, because she connects so many people to so many things that need to happen, and organizations that can make that happen. So the ideas that are coming back seemingly are help you do your jobs better, and then help those that need the help find it more effectively. Those are things that I think the city can do, and I'm hoping that the city manager will concur with that, and we'll be talking about a vote to allocate some of those funds in very short order. So thank you for that. With that, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for sticking around.
Thank you.
We'll take a 5-minute recess just now. Actually, it'll be probably a 10-minute recess, just given, a lot of folks have been having a lot of sit down. Welcome back. We have now up the city manager's items which require action. City Manager Conard.
Thank you, Mayor. First up is approval of the license agreement between the city and the General Services Administration. You will recall this was on the last agenda, but we inadvertently did not attach the correct document. So attached to your packet tonight is the correct document, which allows the GSA and the city to enter into a renewed license agreement for a period of 180 days to allow the city to continue to use the parking field outside the building.
Any questions on this agreement? I'd wait a motion to approve or move to authorize the city manager to execute the proposed license agreement with GSA.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Item number 2 is relative to the renewal of 3 license agreements within Prescott Park between the city and Gundalo Company, the Prescott Park Arts Festival, and the New Hampshire Art Association. We're looking for 5-year renewals for each of these 3 license agreements. And with the help of Assistant City Attorney Jane Farini, who's here with any questions, we bring these forward to you. It is important to note that all agreements for each organization are similar in form. That does not vary significantly, but does include separate schedules that are specifically tailored to each organization's operations and specific programs. And the detailed provisions included in the license agreements have clarified roles and responsibilities, have improved communication, and most importantly, improved operations and the public's enjoyment of the park in general. So we ask for your consideration with 3 separate votes to support 5-year renewals for the city with each of the 3 entities.
Any discussion?
Do you want a motion, Your Honor?
Sure, let's put it, well, I'll wait a motion to, we got to do each one of them, I guess.
Yep.
So, let's start with the Gundalo Company. I'll wait a motion to approve the Prescott Park license agreement between the city and the Gundalo Company in a form similar to the attachment in the city council packet, and to authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Bagley?
Oh, sorry.
Councilor Moreau?
There was a question brought up during public comment regarding the city paying utilities under number 13. If you could just explain that for the public would be great.
I can, and I failed to mention that Arts Festival Executive Director Courtney Perkins is with us on Zoom and can answer any questions that I might not be able to. But I can confirm that Section 13, specific to the Arts Festival license agreement, should be modified because the Arts Festival does in fact pay utilities at both the pavilion, which we know as the prop, and at the stage, and the city pays the Arts Festival share of utilities at the Shaw Building, which are fairly minimal. And relative to Gundalo and New Hampshire Art Association, the city does pay those utilities. However, energy use for both entities is very minimal.
Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, I'd wait a sample motion to, or I'd wait a motion to approve the Prescott Park license agreement between the city and the Prescott Park Arts Festival in a similar form to the attachment in the city council packet, and to authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess we're giving the city manager authority to act, so to change the language on the gas and electric should be within there. And then the second comment that I wanted to make, which is the reason I raised my hand originally, my understanding about the chairs that came up earlier is that is dependent on fire and safety code. And the reason we use language like that is if the fire and safety code was to change, the agreement would stay in compliance. Or is it a different reason?
I'm going to ask Courtney to unmute. Courtney, do you know the answer to that question before I ask for Jane to give us a try?
I think Andrew is right. They do address the fire and safety code in regards to tables and chairs with language specific to 15 feet per square feet per person. So I think they sort of allude to it in the document without directly speaking to it. But if Jane has a different answer, then I am happy to go with hers as well.
Jane? And Jane is going to come up just to clarify, but while she's coming up, I just want to let you know that the map for the Arts Festival license agreement was inadvertently omitted. It did not change. It will not change. It will be in the final license agreement, just to be clear.
Good evening. I have nothing to add. Thank you, Jane.
Oh, Counselor Tabor.
Yes, I have to abstain because I have a fiduciary role on the board that conflicts with my council roles.
Understand. Any further question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Next up, New Hampshire Art Association. I'd wait a motion to approve the Prescott Park license agreement between the city and the New Hampshire Art Association in a form similar to the attachment in the city council packet and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion here? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
The next item is a request for first reading at the June 5th council meeting relative to amendments to Chapter 4, the city's food licensing and regulations ordinance. Really what this does is twofold. It updates the city's food code to 2022 standards. We're currently working off of 2009 FDA food code. And it also adds the appropriate definitions so the city can adequately address how we permit and inspect food manufacturing plants in particular.
Any questions? First, I'd wait a motion to schedule first reading of the amendments to Chapter 4, the city's food licensing and regulations ordinance at the June 5th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Cook?
I do have a question about one of the additions, adding a subsection on drain boards. I'm hoping that this isn't too confusing of a question. I'm wondering if this requirement is going to require organizations, entities to alter their existing sink setup, and how many entities would have to do that?
I see Kim standing and walking towards the podium. I'm going to assume that means to answer this question, and I very much look forward to it.
No.
Thank you.
So I did have a question, and maybe Kim could answer this one too, and sorry for, over the, it was this weekend or last weekend, there was an email that went out to some restaurants that have dog areas and understand the efforts behind that and the permits that are required. That all made sense. There was a question with one restaurant that came to me with regard to the area where dogs are allowed needing to be moppable. In the event that there are grass or gravel where that might not be possible, how are we going to deal with that? And if this isn't the place to do this, if this is more administrative, happy to bring that back in a second. But since we're opening this up, I thought I'd ask.
Well, that's a requirement of the food code, whether or not you have dogs. During COVID, people were setting up, picnic tables and tables just out on dirt, out on grass, places that were never designed for that use. So when food gets spilled, when dogs have accidents, you still need to have a cleanable surface because you're still handling food. We do have some crushed stone in some places that seems to keep things like that a little bit away from surfaces so that they don't accumulate so much. But I don't know that there's a specific way to get away from having to have a cleanable surface. If you have 12, 15 dogs that come in over the course of a week, it could be a lot of cleaning to be done, and you want to make sure that you can clean.
Okay, so maybe something within the porous nature of the the stone, but I'd leave that to the experts.
Really, the issue is the dirt and the grassy areas where it's very hard to clean up anything that's accumulated. But we have various surfaces on, for decks or for outdoor areas, wood, concrete, as I said, crushed stone. I think that there's probably solutions without people having to go to great lengths or great expense.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kim. All right. All in favor of the sample motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Item number 4 is street naming for 3548 Lafayette Road, formerly known as the Wren's Nest. It is under construction, and the owners are looking to formally rename the private street as Monarch Way. Our DPW has reviewed this request with the state's E911, and they have no objection to the name, and additionally, there are no duplicate names in this zip code.
Councilor Moreau.
Out of total curiosity, does that mean that these residences will all have an address of Monarch Way?
That is correct.
I'd wait a motion to authorize the use of Monarch Way as the private street name for the development of 3548 Lafayette Road.
So moved.
Second?
And just for clarification, if it's a public road, it goes through a process in the city of Portsmouth that this is a private road. People get to name their roads what they wish them to be. Councilor Bagley.
I'm going to bring up a little piece of trivia. Congress Street used to be called King Street, and they renamed it after the Revolution. So, here we are. For our 400th anniversary, getting
you think they're
a Monarch Way back again.
I thought this was in
I think the
regards to the
butterfly.
butterfly. We're growing some butterflies at home. That's all I can think about.
That's
All right.
the world we're going to live in.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes will state that we all thought we were voting for a butterfly.
No coronations.
The last item is finally ratifying and approving the 10th of 10 collective bargaining agreements that the city was working on, and this last one is for the school custodians union. This group was significantly delayed due to their negotiator from the lead union retiring, so we are happy to bring this forward now for your approval.
We'd wait a motion to approve and accept the agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Just appreciate the work that they do. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, on to the consent agenda, and I'd wait a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I would just, sometimes I go through it, just want to point out the Seacoast Mental Health Center requesting permission for the Bridges for Friendship on Saturday, October 14th. Jason Brewster requesting the permission to hold the Blessing of the Fleet on July 27th. I think I saw some cool posters advertised for that.
Yes, I actually have to go pick mine up, but that's actually one of Portsmouth 400 events as well.
Looks like it's going to be awesome. The poster looks really cool too. Next up, presentations. We've knocked the first 3 out. Next is email correspondence. I'd wait a motion to accept and place on file.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, a request from Sue Polidora seeking permission to hold a community reading of the Declaration of Independence in front of the North Church on Tuesday, July 4th, 2023 at 11 a.m. I'd wait a motion to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just curious, because this is usually the public forum area. Can't anyone show up at that location to speak publicly?
That's why I gave a little pause before that one. What's their legal opinion? What's our...
We've had other requests, and we've told them that there's no requirement that they come to the city council, but I think sometimes people want to sort of get on a schedule or give notice to others that they're going to be conducting some event of their own, but it's not a legal requirement, no.
What did we do for the Maritime Folk Festival? Did we do anything for that? Because I know that they had,
That was moved to the city manager to act. We had 2 logistics meetings and.
okay, all right. Counselor Bagley?
I'm just recalling, I think it was for Ukraine food table. We also suggested that they might contact the North Church as well.
That was for tables, though.
That was for
So that was for the setting of tables, I
And the
believe.
obstruction of the sidewalk.
And the obstruction, yeah. Counselor Lombardi?
There is always the ceremony at Strawberry Bank on July 4th. It seems funny that this would be in Market Square, and while the ceremony to bring new citizens into the country is going on at Strawberry Bank.
Are they at conflicting times? When is the
Naturalization.
naturalization ceremony?
I don't know.
I don't know the exact time.
I guess since we're moving it to the city manager with authority to act, she could,
Coordinate.
Can't say that word, but yes, coordinate. But maybe possibly suggest the Liberty Pole as an alternative location? Because that would be right near the ceremony at Strawberry Bank.
Happy to work it out.
I think they'll work it out. Satisfied there's not a legal precedent being set. The reasons that we were doing before were for obstructions and tables. This is a person looking to reenact and the Declaration of Independence. So hopefully from a logistics standpoint, all of that can work out. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Do I have the letter? I was going to read the.
I might be able to pull it up for you.
It's right here.
Got it. So, so we had we personally recognized Mr. Plord at the budget, but we had a letter from Danville Fire Chief Stephen Woodcon regarding the quick actions of Portsmouth Electrical Inspector John Port for intervening at the fire of Sandown Road in Danville and making sure all residents and pets were evacuated safely. I guess I will not read this again because I did read it. Thank you, City Manager, for pulling it out. But I will state that Shanti, and I don't know if this is just Shanti, and I would expect nothing less from Shanti of speaking of growing the tail, but it seemed as though the tail needed a little growing. John was in here on his hands and knees putting out a fire that he noticed after getting a hose and finding how to turn the water back on. This wasn't just like taking up, a garden hose and spraying at some bushes that had caught fire. He was in there to the point where the firemen that were responding ended up, trying to pull him out of this burning building. If he had not acted as he'd done, it would have been a devastating effect. I just want to thank Mr. Port, John, for being an example that we hope we don't have to live up to, but hope that we would in a similar situation. He is the epitome of what we can aspire to with the selfless act, putting others before his own safety. So thank you, John, and we are grateful to have you as a member of the City of Portsmouth team. So I'd wait a motion to accept and place on file.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up is a letter from Tom Koffold, founder of New Hampshire Seacoast LGBTQ History Project, requesting permission to display 6 panels describing the history of the LGBT community on the Seacoast at the City Hall during the month of June 2023. Don't have a sample motion on this, but would expect to refer to the city manager with the authority to act.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know if many of you had the opportunity last year to see the exhibit that was also part of this. There's a much larger exhibit that was displayed at the Athenaeum last year for a month, and this is just a small piece. The 6 panels is a small piece of that history, and this is the history of the LGBTQ community on the Seacoast. There's years and years of work that went into that exhibit, and I believe that these 6 panels are a great representation of that history, especially coming up on Pride Month in June.
Very much excited to do that. Although the vote didn't pass, the first vote for non-discrimination in the state happened here at the request of the motion of and Councilor Jim Splain. So look forward to hosting those, and thank you, Tom, for all the hard work that you do, bringing more awareness to courageous individuals, men and women of the Seacoast past. It's appreciated to this day. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, we're on to the council. I'd wait a way to vote on the reappointment of Dave Adams to the Historic District Commission.
It's to be
It's to be
considered.
considered.
It's considered. Appointment to be considered. Got to read that stuff. So that's just in the future. If you have a problem or anything to discuss before that vote, which again is obviously in 2 weeks because it says so right there, please bring that up to me more privately than this. Next up, an appointment to be voted. I would await the vote to appoint, or await the motion to appoint Peter Splain to the Cemetery Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Peter, for your willingness to serve the city. Councilor Dent.
I move to refer the draft ordinance codifying the Sustainability Committee to the Governance Committee and to the Legal Department for review and report back to the City Council for first reading.
Second.
Speak to that. It's 10 years now since I first joined the Sustainability Committee. I wasn't on it for 2 years, but during that 2-year absence, it has picked up steam significantly, and now the majority, we voted on it, it was unanimous, wanted to codify the Sustainability Committee as a standing committee. And I'm just going to hit a couple highlights on the draft, which is page 143. I'm actually going to start at the bottom, which seems a little strange, but follow me on this. It says that the ordinance would take effect upon adoption of Portsmouth's Climate Action Plan. The reason for that is of the 3 powers and duties which were identified when it comes to simply providing advice and guidance to the City Council, City Manager, and City Boards. The first one is with respect to the Climate Action Plan. So it made sense to us to first have the Climate Action Plan be adopted and then have this ordinance take effect. When it comes to membership, what we would like to do is have members from the Eco Club. Might not always be called the Eco Club. That's why I refer to this using language such as designated students from the Portsmouth School District on it. But the issue there is our current ordinance only allows people who live in Portsmouth to be on our boards. However, members from the Eco Club, they're from anywhere in the district. For example, one of our most active members is from Rye, as was his sister before him a couple of years back. Meanwhile, one of our other active high school age students, she's homeschooled, so she's not actually part of the Eco Club. So that's why the very first section here, residency requirement, I added language which reads, this residency requirement does not apply to students on a commission or authority that attend or could attend classes in the Portsmouth School District. So that's the question which I had for legal, whenever they get back to us on that, if we could actually make that a thing in our ordinances so non-residents who are students could sit on our boards and commissions.
Thank you, Councilor Denton. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I am fortunate to sit on the Sustainability Committee with Councilor Denton, and I am thrilled that he's bringing this forward from Sustainability to the Governance Committee to consider. And this is a little foreshadowing, but the Governance Committee has been working with blue ribbon committees that have been in place for quite some time on deciding whether or not they want to be a standing committee or if they have achieved their mission as a blue ribbon committee. And so I'm excited to see this come forward to the Governance Committee. The Governance Committee will be happy to look at it. I think we are expecting to see a few of these.
Well, thank you, Councilor Denton. I think it is well past time, and I think the biggest question is going to be membership and figuring all of that out. It is one of our most robust committees, and I'm sure that there will be a plan in place around that. As long as you're the one, if there is contraction, you know, you're leading the charge on making recommendations around that. But I think this is well past time to make a permanent fixture well beyond the control of any one council. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, Councilor Morone.
Yes, you will find in your packet a report that was presented to Land Use Committee at the beginning of this month, and we made a slight adjustment to it, which was to add one more sort of long-term lot to look at. But it's come to the point that after having staff go out and actually be boots on the ground and actually look at all of these and to give us their thoughts back on each and every parcel, they've come up with a list of 4 possibilities. At this point, if we're going to do any more investigation of these properties, it's going to take spending money. So I thought, one, only the council can really find the money and decide what money to spend if we want to have more work done, or 2, where do we want to go from here? I didn't think that land use should really be making those calls. I think it should be this body that actually has that discussion. So I'm opening this up for a very lovely discussion.
Thank you, Councilor Moreau. Is there a motion then?
No specific motion. I think we just need to figure out direction, and once we discuss and if we can figure out a direction the council wants to go, I'm happy to try to craft some sort of motion, but I didn't want to force our hand in any one specific direction.
Got it.
Someone must have an opinion.
Councilor Bagley.
I'm probably going to get myself in hot water because I don't know if I understand what you're asking 100%. But I do think from the work done by the Land Use Committee, it does look like the initial site that was identified would be a good location for workforce housing.
Well, there's 4 of them.
So specifically the Sherburne School.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should consider as a council, certainly the initial plan met a lot of resistance, but I do recall that there was some talk among the residents there that a plan of lesser scope might be more amenable. So I think there might be potential for development there, and I think we as a council should consider ways to move that forward.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Assistant Mayor.
I would think it would be a good next step to take a deeper dive into some of these, kind of try to narrow this list a little bit down and bring it back to council again. Some of these areas, as we know, as you look through, have more passive recreational areas. Some of them are more conservation. So really kind of getting with staff and scoping down what could be just from the, bird's eye view, buildable or not buildable, and then bring that list down a little bit more. And then from there, figure out any funds that will be needed to deeper dive. So kind of start cutting this list away before we spend.
Councilor Moreau.
I sort of feel like that's the 4 that we have.
Okay.
That's, these they feel have buildable lots based off of a visual view of it. That they're, I see the 2 most promising as being the Falkland Way, where it might be a small lot for the city, but there's nothing on it right now, but it is adjacent to Portsmouth Housing Authority property, and there might be the possibility of them combining our lot and a portion of their lot to actually, and people want to really look and see which one that is. I can tell you what page. They're on page 152. It's the top section. So the little triangle that sort of sits, that building up on the left-hand corner is Portsmouth Housing Authority property, and they own that triangle of grassy land that's across the street adjacent to ours. So I think there are some possibilities there to build something along with the Sherburne School. So I see those as the most promising. The Greenleaf Ave is a promising site, but it's currently constrained by our current skateboard park and a lease to Operation Blessing, if I remember correctly. I don't know how long that lease is. And the other one is our parking lot. So if we're just looking at places that, might have a shorter term ability to actually do something with, I see those 2 as the most promising to investigate further.
Councillor Denton.
I would also like to see the lower lot pursued. I personally like that idea. I'm not sure what it would cost, but I don't want to see it ruled out. And if all 3 of those make sense, then we could pursue building at all 3 of them. But it's very close to downtown, and I think it checks a lot of boxes.
Well, I think that, I don't know if we're in the position to cut out any of these. Seems like they've cut out a lot, and we went from a lot,
Almost 200.
200 to 4.
We've already cut
Like, I
out quite a
think-
bit.
And I got news, we're not going to solve anything with 1, and we're not even really going to do it with 4. So I think, our responsibility is to look at all of these in terms of, and then look with our partners, and it's PHA, could be other, nonprofit housing, but to be able to say, hey, here's 4 areas that we would think are worthwhile on building, and let's have a timeline to do all 4 of these. Councillor Cook, and then the Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Greenleaf Avenue site, where Operation Blessing is currently operating, I know is in active use. And so I do question whether or not that site, which is not particularly, maybe it's large enough, I guess, to develop. I question whether or not we want to displace one of the only entities that operates a shelter in the winter, warming shelters in the winter. I realize that that's not the site of the shelter, but it's the site of a lot of their work, unless we have alternative space for them. So I realize we have a skate park going in elsewhere, and so we can, transition that. But I would be a little concerned about displacing Operation Blessing without offering other space to them.
Assistant Mayor.
Thank you. I'd be interested in this, maybe a city manager, city staff item, to get a report back. I know there are some other needs studies going around. I think about the police department and how they are scouting also city-owned land. And so I feel like that needs to be part of this conversation as we start to look to spend money to analyze some of these. So I don't know if the police commission is at a point where they can say which locations that they are looking at for potential recommendation for a police department or what. But I think that as we obviously have done this work, I assume that they have done similar work in their study.
We have staff people serving on the community policing facility working group, and that is something that is expected in the June timeframe. Is for a list to become public. I think it's as early as June. I'm not really getting any nods, yes or no. Yes, I get a yes.
There's a lot of head.
Time frame is it is expected that the police facility conversation relative to sites will be public and part of this conversation. But since I have the floor for a moment, the Greenleaf Rec Center has federal restrictions on the property, and notably a concession agreement on recreational aspects to the site, so we'd need to do some further research on that one before it's declared viable in any sort of way.
Councilor Tabor.
A couple of thoughts for us. Thanks for this, because it did exactly what we asked. We wanted to look at the neighborhood said, have you looked at all the other opportunities? We just did. We've narrowed it down to 4. That's great. I think we need to know the capacity of the PHA. I think they have some capacity limits on their ability to finance so many projects in a year. I'd love to see us do all 4, but that may not be feasible, so we need to hear from them. Also on Greenleaf, that backs up to a PHA project already. And I'm not sure it's the best city planning, or it's not just, maybe not the best for people to concentrate all of our affordable or subsidized housing in one place. I think it's better spread out through the community, better for people, better for families raising their kids. And I agree that we certainly, on the lower lot, need to see whether that plays well with plans for the police station or not, because I know that was a potential police station site.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And maybe it's a bit of a technical question, but lots 3 and 4 are considerably larger at 5 and 3 acres versus 1 and 2 at 1 acre. Has there been discussion of, how limiting 1 acre is or isn't relative to the other 2 lots?
It was just discussed that they were looking at a minimum of 1 acre, so they were looking at 1 acre in larger lots. That's what they were.
But I think
to make it so that they could put at least a reasonable amount of building on it.
I think you can look at Ruth Griffin Place to know that an acre, roughly an acre, that's roughly 65 units.
Yeah.
And built in that fashion.
With some parking concessions
Yes.
on that versus, I don't know if they were further out, we would do that. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think with our previous talks with PHA and stuff on affordable housing, if I think I remember correctly, they have 40 units. And they can only apply for tax credits for 1 site per year. So they can't be working on multiple sites. They can only focus on 1 project and apply for those federal tax credits. But I believe there's a certain amount of number of units they need. So I think that's where the acre came out.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question around, I think it's probably for Councilor Moreau, around these sites that were identified but that are conservation area. First, why were they identified, given that they're in conservation? And is it even a possibility to develop conservation area?
We did not know they were all in conservation, or that they might have deed restrictions based off the funds that were used to buy them when we picked them out. That was later found, and no. No is the second answer.
Thank you.
Councilor Lombardi.
Yeah, I thought that the Borthwick Ave property had the power lines going over it.
It does, yeah.
It would be kind of an unfortunate place to put a project.
Yeah, it was not suitable.
Yeah.
That's why it was taken off the list as well, or found not to be on one of the top ones to build. If I might just add to the conversation a little bit more, I actually did get to meet someone who works for a company who has one of the privately owned lots that I know we've identified several around the city that could be possible, and I had a promising initial conversation and planned on having a meeting with them as soon as possible to discuss the possibility of them wanting a affordable housing project on land. So we do have, we are at least trying to continue the conversation outside city-owned property, so that there is hope for more. Know that we're doing this on many fronts, not just the one.
Sure. Well, I think that the majority of our land is developed, given the conservation or, just wetland encroachment, pick your poison in terms of, percentages. So, eventually we'll have to look at redeveloping, some of these. But I think for the purposes of this conversation, we went into a conversation at the Sherburne School. Folks could reasonably describe that as passionate conversation. I enjoyed that passionate conversation. I enjoyed so many people showed up. What I thought coming out of that is that we needed to answer a question of why Sherburne. I think from right here, it's the largest of 4 buildable lots. That's one reason. And the reason of maybe why now with Sherburne is the fact that we have a plan to dispose of the school and move them over to a modern facility at the Robert J. Lister Academy for synergies around, or the community campus. Move the Robert J. Lister Academy to a community campus. And so I think that there is, the why there. And I understand that there was certainly community feedback that was questioning a lot. I think we have more answers now than we did at the time of why other facilities or what other, wouldn't work. And I don't think that we have the community buy-in yet because we haven't been talking about this. I would think that if we were to move forward with the Sherburne, it's not, definitive that we are talking about that now, there would probably need to be a group of residents from the Panaway neighborhood. I would say direct abutters and Panaway, maybe housing advocates more in general, and try to have a discussion given this information and, potentially more information that we could get out of the PHA, out of what would actually go there. Because I think, we did ourselves a disservice, and I'll take the L on that, for trying to meet timelines that weren't realistic. And even though, this now supports that this was a good site, getting there faster than the public got there and certainly the neighbors got there, I think might have been, or certainly was a mistake. So I think if we were to move forward with the Sherburne site, and it would be my suggestion, just because it's the biggest out of the 4 buildable, that we would form a Blue Ribbon Committee to discuss that, to include those members of that with other members throughout the greater Portsmouth area to try to get some input from there. But put that out in the ether, see how folks react to that. Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would agree. I think you expressed my feelings a lot more eloquently than I did at the start of this. One thing that may be helpful to aid the discussion, I'm sure it already exists, but I recall the neighborhood was a little bit concerned that they felt their neighborhood was getting an undue burden with this type of housing. It might be nice to have a map of all the different locations where we have affordable or workforce housing, because I do believe a good number of them are in the downtown area. So I don't think, I think to Councilor Tabor's point that, spreading it throughout our community, a lot of studies have shown that you want the diversity of income levels not segregated, you want them intermixed. So aiding any one of these 4 sites, I think it would be helpful if we could display the areas that we currently have affordable housing.
Sure. I don't know if on these, they would be, all of them would be next to places where we already have affordable housing, minus one, which was started as, I guess, affordable housing for the Navy Yard back 200 years ago. So it kind of, it's that heat map is going to show that, Greenleaf next to Walmasette, Junkins next to Connors Cottage, Falkland Way against the senior center or the senior housing at the Heights, literally abutting all of those.
Gosling. There's another one on Woodbury. There's a
Oh,
fair
sure, I
amount.
was just talking
State
about
Street,
these,
but
these,
East Side
these
spread
three,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, also, like, you know, I think the majority of the conversation that we had was, that I took away, was reasonable neighbors having a conversation around traffic impacts, having, you know, neighborhood-like feel. What I didn't necessarily take away from that was folks that were upset about the type of people that would be moving in there. You know, maybe some of that was expressed privately. You know, these are our neighbors. These are the folks that work at, you know, our school department, the folks that work in our restaurants, the people that plow our streets. They are you and me, they are us. And we have just created so much housing that is not for us, that is for really, really wealthy people, that we need below market rate solutions just to get to the people that, you know, have jobs that are physically here and not taking a paycheck from, you know, Boston or New York. And so, you know, that's a long way of saying is that I'm happy to hear any arguments about the impacts, travel, you know, all of the things that we all complain about in our own neighborhoods. But, you know, I guess I have a shorter attention span for, you know, different types of folks, because these are our folks. Assistant Mayor.
So just getting back, so it seems to me that what I'm taking away from the council is that the council is interested in the land use board diving deeper into 2 locations, Faulkner and, did I say that right? Falkland and Sherburne. So is that just to get back to guidance that we can bring back to the land use committee so that we can?
When is the next meeting of the Land Use Committee?
It's the first Friday of June. So
Is it
June
before our
2nd.
next council meeting?
June 2nd?
It is.
Okay. Councilor Moreau, or Councilor Denton, you haven't had too many bites of this apple.
The 2 thoughts, again, I don't want to rule out the lower lot. And the second, that when it comes to Falkland Way, it has a lot of the same characteristics that Panaway has. Okay, it's isolated, it's a neighborhood by itself, so it's going to be similar concerns. And the sole point there is any place we go to put this will likely run into those concerns, especially these 2, except for here, there already is some affordable housing at Falkland Way. So just, that's not weighing one way or the other, it's just stating the obvious. But back to my first thing, which I said, I don't want to rule out the lower lot, and I like to see all 3 ideally pursued. I know we can only do 1 at a time, but.
Well, we can prep the
Exactly.
public, prep the air.
One of the things, just to bring up, that a few members of the public brought up during our last land use committee meeting was that they would love to see a report from Portsmouth Housing Authority on their existing properties and whether or not they've looked into further developing properties that they already have. I don't know if that exists. I said that we would reach out, but I figured I would present that also here to see whether or not this council had an interest in seeing that report as well.
Where are they going to go, the people that are, I mean, I would certainly say that as a next project, if those folks can move into another place. But I guess that my first question would be, where are they going until that's done? That's a tough ask to say that we're going to, you know, it could be a great second ask of let's get a project done and then redevelop Goslings, but it's tough to say, check back in 2 years when we're done with this. Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. And to Councilor Moreau's point, I do remember seeing a very extensive presentation on doubling Gosling Meadows, and I think that was 2017 or 2019.
There was a charrette on it.
And I think maybe COVID hit. I don't know the reason why it stopped, if it ran into a technical reason it stopped, or if COVID hit and it just sort of got forgotten.
It was a charrette done through the Seacoast Workforce Housing. That's who had actually done it. And I don't know the reasons whether or not it went move forward. I just remember when it was being done.
Counselor Cook, and we try to be so we don't have a motion, which it's tough to discuss for and against something. I would try to get something, I guess, would it be the will of the land use committee to have us decide one of these four, to give direction to the land use committee? You know, I would like to have something that we could work towards.
Well, if we want more investigation by staff or somebody else into these properties, that costs money. So the question's going to be, are we going to keep looking into this? Do we want to ask Portsmouth Housing Authority to look into these? Where does this council want us to go in that, what direction with what we've discovered so far?
Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's exactly where I was going. I was going to suggest that we ask the Portsmouth Housing Authority to look at these properties and let us know what they think is feasible, because they may have explored this property, especially the Falkland Way property. They may have explored that in the past. We don't know what they've done, and they may have a better understanding of what is feasible from their side.
Counselor Cook, Counselor Tabor.
I just put this out maybe as a straw man proposal of the sequence of tasks and decisions. Wouldn't our first decision be, we need to know from that PHA if they've only got capacity for one project more than 40 units? If that's the case, you know, then we really are looking at the number one site as evaluated by your committee, which is Sherburne. And then the next step would be the Blue Ribbon Committee that you've suggested, Mayor. It would make sense, I think, to educate that committee by Nick Cracknell on why we can't let the market solve this problem, why we need to create workforce housing, and what workforce housing looks like, and who participates in it. And maybe the question we ask that Blue Ribbon Committee is not a yes or no question, but what are the values and priorities that you in that neighborhood would have, recognizing our need to get housing built. On the other hand, if you go back and the PHA has the capacity to do more than one project, you know, then I think we look at Falkland, but I don't think that capacity is there. So if that makes a sensible sequence of things, our first next step would be to find out what's doable by PHA. And then maybe June 5, we would have a motion, you know, about any kind of Blue Ribbon Committee.
Counselor Bagley?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor.
Counselor Tabor. Sounds reasonable.
You know, kind of going back to the points I was saying before is, you know, not anytime, but most of the time when there's any sort of construction whatsoever in the city, the neighborhood might not necessarily like it because it means disruption, it means maybe potential change, maybe more traffic, what have you. So I feel like any parcel we pick will probably face resistance. I don't think there's a parcel in the city we can select and everybody will be like, oh, that's a perfect parcel, and we won't get pushback. I would worry that if we refer this back to PHA, we're letting, we're maybe giving them an unreasonable task, because I think the selection of the parcel is a bit of a political type of decision, because there's going to be people upset no matter what is selected. So I don't know the answer as to how we get more data. Maybe we do need to spend some money to figure out what is the best site. But I do think that either through the Blue Ribbon Committee or some other way, the council really needs to decide which property if any, that we would be using going forward.
I appreciate that. Or Assistant Mayor.
Well, I think a little bit of resolve to this is that we do have a member of PHA on the land use committee, so it seems like we need to invite, well, he's on our land use committee, and maybe invite one of their directors in to have a broader discussion. So if that seems to be the will of the council, which I think the goal of this is to get the will of the council of what the next steps for land use is. So if the next step seems to be that the council would like to bring PHA into the discussion about these properties, then I think that is what we could do before getting a mile down the road. That's what I'm concerned about.
We certainly could ask Craig to ask his head of his development group to also come in, and we could give them these 4 properties and give them the report and say, could they come back and see from their analysis of looking at land in Portsmouth, if they've looked at these lots and what their feasibility is from a 20,000 sort of view perspective.
Councilor Bullock?
Your Honor, I think that's a great idea, Councilor Moreau. So I think we don't want the public to be perceived that PHA is driving the cart. We're driving the cart, but we would have to work with PHA to develop anything under market rate. So I think that would be a good start to have the conversation together, and then we're all talking about the 4 properties together.
That sounds reasonable. I guess I don't want to give folks we've narrowed down 200 properties to 4. Lots of work has gone into that. I appreciate that. I'm not looking at 1 out of, and I'm 1 of 9, but I'm not looking at 1 out of 4. I'm looking at which one are we starting first, and putting in the context of which is the best one to start first. And I would say it would be tough to convince me, and I'll try not to be biased, but the Sherburne property, which has, $8 million of deferred maintenance if we want to continue it, or if we would put it into that. So there's decisions that come with that might not come with the surface level parking lot at Junkins Ave, that's serving, a purpose distinctly in there. And, the work that Councilor Blaylock was the one that pushed up the sports fields, to account for, any loss of a softball field. But all of that, I would like to have an answer of which one should be first in this, and reasons to that. And I will, I'll state again, based on the meeting that you will have, if there is a willingness to have at Sherburne, it's tricky with the setting of the schedule, but I do think that having community engagement on that site to engage on what that process is going to look like. If we vote to select that site as the one to move forward, I think that would be also at that next meeting to call a Blue Ribbon Committee that would be working both with abutters and also the rest of the larger community, because this is a community initiative. It's not Portsmouth's bigger than any one of our addresses. So I think that if the motion that somebody would make would be to prioritize the 4, or to have a priority in terms of the 4 selected land use in consultation with the PHA, that's something that could certainly support at the land use meeting. Do you want to make it sound
I
prettier?
will take a stab off the top of my head, making a motion. I make a motion that we request that the Land Use Committee look back at these, work to prioritize these 4 lots as what should be the first most viable lot to look at for development, and that we do that in connection with the request of the head of the Portsmouth Housing Authority Development Arm, come in and give us input from development side of things as well.
Second.
I was a little messy, but.
At the end, a little bit. But
Sorry.
Kelly got it.
That's what happens when it's off the top of my head.
I have a I guess city manager or legal inquiry. And I hate to open it, but any project we do is going to have to go out potentially for bid or RFP, correct?
For the development,
For the development.
for the construction,
Okay.
I think.
That would depend.
Depends on whether or not
That
we
is
lease
not a
the
clear
land.
answer. Does
Okay.
not have to.
Okay.
Counselor Cook?
I just have a question on timeline. How quickly do you think the Land Use Committee can report back to the council?
Well, it depends on whether or not we get any sort of resolution at our June, 1st of June, 2nd of June meeting. So probably no later than July 10th, I would
I'd
think.
say the July 10th. meeting.
Yeah, that gives us at least 2 meetings if we need them, if we're not able to pull this all together for the next meeting.
And I would expect in land use meetings, we've had, great, we've had pretty consistent attendance from Panaway Manor. So I assume, once residents have heard from us that this is a narrow down, which a lot of them have, I assume we will have a higher turnout at our next meeting. And so we want to make sure that we're having thorough discussion with them, with PHA and bringing it back to the council potentially.
Yeah. Yes, I think there will be a lot of attendance at our next meeting.
Which is great.
May need more space.
Do it right here. Student library, actually.
Okay.
So the motion is, Kelly, would you mind reading it back?
Ooh,
Does it go-
I'll try. Got a little squirrely at the end, but I'll try.
You can cut it off at the end.
Move to request that the Land Use Committee work to prioritize the lots, which is the most viable lots, with a report from PHA
With their input.
with input. Okay, I did pretty good
I think it's great.
for that.
I think that works for me.
Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, any opposed? Okay. I thought,
Thank
I didn't
you.
see the John finger raised there. All right. Next up, Counselor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've got 2 motions I'll make tonight. Sample motion, the first one is I move to accept and approve the action sheet and minutes of April 6, 2023 Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee. And if I get a second, I'll speak to this.
Second.
So the main thing that we decided at this meeting is the Woodbury traffic calming. We had a number of neighborhood meetings at the New Franklin School that were pretty well attended. We got a lot of great suggestions from the public that we then incorporated from our original design, which was traffic islands to, I'm going to say the term wrong, but they're not speed humps.
Cushions.
Speed cushions. And the difference is they have channels in them, which a larger vehicle like an ambulance or a fire truck can drive through. The other advantage of these is they don't cause as many drainage issues. So the plan is this summer we will install temporary speed cushions, which are made out of a rubberized material. We may move them around a little bit during the trial to make sure we're getting the results that we want. And then based on those trial results, next year we would install permanent speed cushions. And I think, as I've warned you before, once this trial starts, you probably will get some text messages and emails from people that are unaware that we're going to be putting speed cushions on a road with 7,000 cars a day.
I'm corrected, it's pillows.
Pillows.
Speed pillows.
Speed pillows.
And they're coming in June.
That sounds even more ridiculous.
Sounds like I should go to
Pillows sound
sleep.
good at 10 o'clock at night. Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. As somebody who attended both of those meetings, I would say that the neighborhood response was robust, and the neighbors seemed to be very happy with this ultimate solution. So the neighbors were really driving this discussion, and I want to applaud the city staff for listening. DPW did a great job of listening, and so did the Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee to what the residents wanted on this street.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I know this project's been going on for a number of years, even long before I was on the council, and there's been a lot of people that have come to PTS meetings to specifically request this. And at the meeting that we're talking about now, I don't believe any residents came to speak against it. So I think we did a really good job of the community that is immediately right there that's most concerned, addressing most of their concerns.
Councilor Bagley? Did you make, was the motion seconded?
It was.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, and now I'll move to accept and approve the action sheet and minutes of the May 4th, 2023 Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee. And if I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Second?
Yeah, thank you. So this one had a number of exciting ones. We did have a report back on the mini roundabout, which is much talked about. There's a video that is now posted online as well that shows different fire trucks, the Coast Bus, the Wildcat Bus, all navigating it successfully. We did move one school bus stop to a slightly different location because it makes more sense. And the initial feedback 2 weeks in is that it's working reasonably well, but it is still a pilot program, and we are continuing to monitor the traffic behavior and make sure that we are getting the results that we like. The second thing I want to talk about, I can't read my writing. The sidewalk at where the old health store was downtown. They're going to be doing some construction there, so the sidewalk's going to be blocked off for a period of time, I think about a month or so this summer. And then the final one that I'm really excited about is some of you may know this year for the holiday parade, for the first time ever, we had an accessible viewing station at the top of the Bridge Street lot, and we had some temporary accessible parking spaces and a group of dedicated volunteers that set up chairs for members of the public that needed an accessible viewing station because it was a little misty that night. They even had towels out and I think some snacks. So that was great. And from that, it generated the idea. The Prescott Park Arts Festival has a lot of events at night, and we have 5 accessible spaces, which is more than is required in that lot, and 10 standard spaces. And what we looked at is for significant events during the summer, we could convert that lot to accessible spaces only, and that would generate 15 or 16 accessible spaces. And that we've heard from the community that needs accessibility options, that it's very difficult for them to attend events there because of the lack of parking. So I think that's a real win for the community, and we're prioritizing public parking for those people that need it the most so they can attend the events in the summertime.
That's great.
And those are accessible spaces only in the evening, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and I will say
We're not really taking away spaces during the day.
No, they would be temporary, and we'll probably do it a little bit on a trial basis this summer and see what works and what doesn't. I think DPW has a pretty good idea of how they can achieve this, and we did reach out to the Prescott Park Arts Festival, and they were very much in support of this idea. They thought it was a great idea, so it seems to have a lot of community buy-in.
Well, as a user of the roundabout, I've heard a lot of people came up to me, and most of it's been reasonably positive. People were actually pretty excited about it, a couple folks. So thank you. I thought at first people thought crazy, and then as they were using it, they seemed to come around. When they were even okay, some of them were okay with it when I told them it was a pilot and it would be a little, if it stayed, it would be a little fancier than that. Then they were oh, okay, yeah, I thought it was a little.
So I'll share an anecdote that I shared in the Parking Traffic Safety Committee. My daughter is starting driver's ed next week. She's going to be 16 in July, and we were driving in Mom's SUV, and I had her go around the roundabout without warning her first. She had quite the reaction, and she's not impressed with things that I approve on the PTS, it seems. But she was able to navigate it, both to go straight through and to go 3/4 through and take that left without any issue. So,
awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Lombardi.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. When we sent the outdoor dining to the EDC, the Economic Development Commission, it triggered effort to look at their ordinance and to understand how they should approach this. And in doing so, they realized that the ordinance was created in 1991, mostly, I believe, as a result of the closure of Pease Air Force Base. They thought it might be worthwhile to look at that because the economic situation of Portsmouth is quite different now than it was at that time. And so they have drafted a sample of an ordinance for the EDC, an updated ordinance of the EDC, and asked me to bring it up here and create a motion to move to refer it to the governance committee and the legal department, and then report back to the city council. So that's what I'm doing.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Sounds great. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. Next up, approval of grants and donations. First up, the acceptance of New Hampshire DES 2022 to 2024 Strategic Planning Grant. I'd wait a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into a grant agreement with the State of New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to accept up to $50,000 from the New Hampshire DES 2022-2024 Strategic Planning Grant Program to assist with paying a portion of the comprehensive planning study and preliminary engineering evaluation of the Lafayette Tank Pressure Zone.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, an acceptance of donation to the Senior Activity Center from the Portsmouth Garden Club in the amount of $500. I'd wait a motion to approve and accept the donation as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And finally, I would acceptance of various police department grants. First, in the amount of New Hampshire Department of Justice for the New Hampshire Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force of $377,882, and the 2023 Safe and Active Grant Award from the Injury Prevention Center at Dartmouth Hitchcock for 50 multi-sport helmets, 50 bike lights, and educational materials. I'd wait a motion to approve and accept the grants for the police department as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? There are no informational items. Are there miscellaneous? Councilor Moreau.
I just want to remind everyone that our first Portsmouth 400 signature event is coming up very soon on June 3rd. It's our parade, and it's going to be a doozy.
Thank you, Councilor Moreau.
Your Honor, I want to add on to that if I can. Assistant City Attorney Jane Farini reminds me that in support of all the events going on Saturday, June 3rd, the city would like to support what's going on with the 400th and provide 2 different shuttle loops, allowing people to park in satellite parking areas, and we would bring them into town. But in order to do that, we need approval from the council to allow me to enter into special event parking agreements. And given that the next council meeting after tonight is not till after the parade, we would like to catch that. And would you indulge an action on the fly to allow me to negotiate and enter into 2 special event parking agreements with the Connect Church, known as the Bethel Assembly of God, out on Market Street, and the Islamic Society of the Seacoast on Spinney Road for special event parking on that date.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Oh, did you have discussion?
No, sorry. Just try to jump the gun on miscellaneous.
Councilor Bagley.
I forgot to mention the last thing that we talked about in PTS, which is the mayor's bike ride, Saturday, May 20th, which will be preceded at Little Harbor School from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. with a bike rodeo, which, as I understand it, is a chance for parents and residents and kids to bring their bikes to Little Harbor parking lot and learn about maintenance and how to wear their helmets and how to fix squeaky derailleurs and brakes and things like that.
Honestly thought that's when they were going to try to lasso me on a bike. But
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and I will suggest it to Sabre.
Councilor Dutton.
Thank you, Your Honor. Due to the Portsmouth 400th Grand Parade on June 3rd, there's a couple changes to Memorial Day this year, so I just wanted to go over them for the public. Because first and foremost, the VFW sent out over 1,000 letters to all the veterans on the seacoast we could find, making sure they knew of these changes. The burial at sea ceremony, which is on Friday, May 26th, so the Friday before Memorial Day, and the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, at 11 o'clock is going to be the burial at sea. It usually lasts about half an hour. It's a short event. It's in Prescott Park by the Anchor. The Memorial Day ceremony itself is going to be moved to Plainsfield this year because there's not going to be a parade marching out there. There's parking right there. There is a number of World War I gravestones there, which were marked for years by Marty Cameron. That will be held at 2 o'clock. So again, that's May 29th. And in the Grand Parade itself, the VFWs originally hopefully get about 10 DeLoreans for veterans who cannot march to ride in the parade. So please feel free to reach out to me if you know any veterans that want to participate in the parade but cannot march. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Denton. Anything else? I'd wait a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.